Chapter 269. The hall trembled as two huge intersecting saber marks appeared. A large amount of rubble and broken wood fell down. Smoke and dust filled the room, and dazzling light shone down. The one who attacked was the second peak master of Chilean Mountain, Huang He. Die! Huang He's face was gloomy. His two sabers swept out like two silver moons intersecting. Boom! The two silver moon sabers danced in the air. The friction produced a shrill shriek that sounded like the cries of ghosts, causing one's eardrums to tremble. The saber intent that accompanied the saber light that could destroy everything surged over like a tsunami. The ground was paved with stone strips. As the saber light passed by, it quickly crumbled, turning into a storm of crushed stones that also fell down. Good saber technique, good saber intent. Ziyue's eyelids twitched, but his eyes were as calm as a lake. A wave of Xiantian genuine qi rose up like rolling magma. The pitch-black blade was like a torrent that was ready to strike, chopping down. A vast and mighty saber that could cause the sky to collapse and the earth to shatter shot out with a strong saber intent that seemed capable of destroying gods and Buddhas. A saber light that was extremely condensed but not more than 3 feet long rushed out and collided with the two silver moon saber lights that were intertwined. Bang! With a loud explosion, the two silver moon saber lights shattered in an instant. The fragments of the saber lights scattered in all directions, directly destroying the storm of broken rocks that had rushed out with it. On the ground, deep holes of saber light that were a few feet deep slowly appeared as the saber light collided with each other with a pu-pu-pu-pu sound. In the sky, the rubble collapsed and rays of sunlight shone down. However, the 3-meter saber light did not seem to change at all. It continued to slash down without stopping. How is this possible? Huang He roared and crossed his two sabers to block the saber light. The Xiantian true qi in his body was like a silver thread. It quickly rolled up and supported a true qi shield. However, in front of the saber light, all struggles seemed to be useless. Puff! The true qi shield collapsed in an instant. The saber light fell on the two sabers like a hot knife through butter. It cut the two sabers into 4 pieces and sank into his chest. Huang He opened his mouth, and his throat moved as if he was trying to suck in the last breath of air in this world. However, he felt that all the Xiantian true qi in his body had leaked out. As a mist of blood sprayed out, the flames of his life withered away, and his eyes lost their luster. Ziyue withdrew his saber and glanced at Huang He indifferently. He knew that there were no more treasures on Huang He's body. Then, his gaze fell on the entrance of the main hall. A group of people rushed in like tide. Each of them had a strong aura. However, at this moment, they all stopped at the entrance of the main hall and looked at by Ziyue in shock, as well as Huang He, the great Xiantian expert on the ground who had already lost his breath. Master Bai, Huang He was killed by you? Chen Xianzhong said with surprise. Is he the invincible blade maniac by Gongzi who killed in an 8? At the side, General Qi looked at by Ziyue solemnly. Moreover, what made him feel incomparably fearful was that the aura that the other party was currently emitting was not first-rate as he had imagined. Xiantian, did he break through to the Xiantian realm? Even though he had just joined forces with Chen Xianzhong and killed Zhang Xiaofeng, who was at the middle Greater Heaven stage. With the help of the army's powerful weapons, he still couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. If he could kill a Xiantian true qi when he was at the Xiantian true qi, how powerful would he be now that he had broken through to the Xiantian realm? This could be seen from the appearance of the yellow crane on the ground. Yes, kill him. Ziyue nodded calmly and said, I'm leaving now. Are you going to stop me? Of course not. Chen Xianzhong forced a smile and stepped aside. At this moment, he was not confident that he could stop Ziyue. General Qi glanced at Ziyue and did not say anything. Third uncle. About Uncle Zhong, Chen Zhixian's expression changed as he gritted his teeth. Bai Ziyue, who was about to take a step forward, paused. He looked at Chen Zhixian and said, You were the one who left a tracking mark on my dog, right? When he found the tracking mark on the black puppy, He had secretly memorized the aura of the caster. Now that the other party had spoken, it immediately caught his attention. After a brief comparison, he found that the person who left the tracking mark was the Chun clan cultivator in front of him. Yes, it was me. What are you going to do about it? Chun Jishin's expression turned cold as he replied with a snort. It's good that you admit it. Nodding his head, Bai Ziyu took a step forward, and the distance of several dozen meters was covered in a flash like a bolt of lightning. How dare you, arrogant! Two cries of shock sounded out. Chun Xianzhong, who was at the early Xiantian realm, and General Qi, who was at the peak of the early Xiantian realm, attacked at the same time. Roar! An earth-shattering sound rang out. It was like the roar of a tiger king, but it was even more like the descent of thunder. Tiger thunder roaring technique. The endless sound waves caused everyone to let out cries of agony. Even the movements of the two Xiantian realm experts slowed down at this moment. Then, they saw a flash of saber light, and a red mark suddenly appeared on Chun Jishin's neck. Puff! Blood spurted out, and a headless corpse appeared on the ground. At the same time, apart from the two Xiantian realm experts, the rest of the people, regardless of whether they were first-rate experts or ninth-layer Qi refinement cultivators, were all severely injured. Not to mention 100% of their strength. They could not even exert 30% of their strength. And this was because Ziyu had mainly targeted Chun Xianzhong and General Qi, the two Xiantian realm experts. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would have died from the roar. Sound technique? Chun Xianzhong and General Qi felt a chill in their hearts, and their faces were extremely unsightly. Until now, they could still feel the endless wind blades cutting their eardrums. Waves of severe pain, their qi and blood surged, and their internal organs were injured. Especially Chun Xianzhong, who had been severely injured in the beginning. Now that he was attacked by the sound wave again, his injuries were about to explode. He could barely suppress it. Elder Chun, can I leave now? Ziyu looked straight at Chun Xianzhong. Please leave. Chun Xianzhong's face twitched, and he said with his eyes lowered. General Qi heaved a sigh of relief and did not say anything. Ziyu's roar had made him completely understand how big the gap between the two of them was. If he really wanted to fight, even with the help of the military's weapons, he was not confident that he could kill Bai Yunfei. Nodding slightly, Ziyu did not stay and directly left. After all, he was not a murderous person. He did not want to kill too many people for no reason. The growth of young Master Bai's strength is too fast. Elder Chun, it seems that I have to go back on my promise. This kind of existence is not someone I can afford to offend. After confirming that Ziyu had left, General Qi looked at Chun Xianzhong and said softly, It's not just fast. It's already beyond the limits of imagination. Chun Xianzhong thought back to when he first met Bai Ziyu. Back then, Bai Ziyu had only been at the peak of second rate. With the fall of the two Xiantian experts of Mount Chilian, the battle became sparse. The various soldiers pushed forward and rarely encountered any obstructions. Ziyu went back the way he came. He directly floated down from the cliff and quickly found the little black dog hiding in a cave. Let's go. Bai Ziyu sat on the little black dog's back and allowed it to carry him away. Only then did he look at the attributes panel. Name, Ziyu Martial Arts Realm. Early Xiantian Realm Immortal Technique Realm. Complete Mortal Realm Stage 9 Martial Arts. Invincible Golden Body Technique Martial Arts. Complete God Vanquishing Saber Technique. Immortal Martial Palm Seal, not initiated 79%. Immortal Techniques. Purple Qi Divine Technique, Level 9. Pentagonal Pure Yuan Technique, not initiated 0%. Immortal Martial True Body, not initiated 0%. Techniques. Complete Talisman Technique Magic. Complete Ice Flame Technique Magic. Instinct. Complete Stun Spirit Spike. Complete Thunderfall Technique. Complete Morning Sun Sword Technique. Complete 100 Steps Wave Treading Technique. Complete Treasure Stabilizing Divine Light. Not initiated 7%. Spiritual Energy. 92241 inch originally. My spiritual energy was only a little more than 100,000. Now, it has reached 920,000. That's equivalent to an extra 820,000 points. This can be considered a huge gain. Bai Ziyu could not help but let out a smile. This time, he actually did not do much. Based on the people he killed, even if he added in Huang He, who had reached the Xiantian realm, it would at most give him 70,000 to 80,000 points of spiritual energy. As for the rest, most of it was the result of fighting between the soldiers and the people of Mount Chilian. This feeling is not bad. Perhaps in the future, as long as I stay in a place full of fighting, my spiritual energy will be greatly increased. With that thought, Ziyu turned his attention to his interspatial pouch. Now that I have the 5-element spiritual items, it's time for me to prepare to open the 5 spiritual apertures and officially cultivate the 5-direction pure origin technique. Ziyu's spiritual energy swept across the interspatial pouch. He felt the aura of the 5 elements spiritual items, and his heart was filled with anticipation. He had been preparing for this day for a long time. The 5-direction pure origin technique could increase his chances of breaking through to the aperture awakening realm by 30%. Its effect even surpassed that of the barrier-breaking pill and was comparable to the aperture awakening pill. Naturally, he placed great importance on it. Opening the apertures through immortal arts is much more difficult than reaching the Xiantian realm. Moreover, it's not like a first-rate expert trying to reach the Xiantian realm. Even if you don't succeed, there's still a chance of survival. Opening the apertures through immortal arts is connecting the apertures of heaven and earth. Once the connection begins, there's only one path to take. If you don't succeed, you'll die trying. The old wandering cultivator, Old Wu, cultivated for 100 years and accumulated a lot of experience, but he still fell at this step and died. Although I'm confident that my experience is not inferior to his, I don't dare to take the risk. Ziyu's eyes narrowed slightly and his heart trembled. I suddenly found a chance to enter the top 100 in the monthly votes. Please give me a wave of monthly votes. Thank you. Chapter 270. With his current 9th layer of the Qi refining stage, he could naturally go into seclusion and break through to the enlightening stage. However, this was a path of life and death. If he wasn't completely confident, he naturally wouldn't dare to take the risk. Apart from the 1,000-year willow heart, the greatest gains from Huang He's treasure house should be these secret manuals. Ziyu flipped his hand, and the book box immediately appeared in his hand. Opening the book box, the first book, 9 Revolutions Xiantian Technique, entered his eyes. Then the second book, Silver Moon Dual Sabers, and the third book, Grand Energy Ignition Technique. The 9 Revolutions Xiantian Technique has 9 revolutions of the mysterious technique. The cultivation speed is relatively slow, but the Xiantian Zhenqi cultivated according to this method is naturally purer than the ordinary cultivation method. It is better than the Xianming green jade technique that I bought from the Clear Cloud Pavilion. Ziyu frowned. Now that he had broken through to the Xiantian stage, he naturally had to choose a technique to cultivate. Originally, he had already planned to cultivate the Xianming green jade technique. At least his strength wouldn't stagnate. Now that he had the 9 Revolutions Xiantian technique, he naturally went with the flow and chose this stronger technique. As for the Silver Moon Saber technique, it should be the dual saber technique used by Huang He. Although its power is far inferior to my God-vanquishing saber technique, it still has some exquisite aspects. As for the Grand Energy Ignition technique, Ziyu flipped through the 3 secret manuals and immediately set his gaze on the Grand Energy Ignition technique. His face revealed a trace of seriousness. This is a desperate technique. Usually, warriors will only use it when they are in a life-or-death crisis. By burning their Xiantian true Qi, they can erupt with power that far surpasses their own strength. However, the price to pay is not small. Not only will the meridians in the body be greatly damaged, once the Xiantian true Qi is exhausted, the technique will automatically burn the warrior's Qi, blood, and life force, causing irreversible damage. If they don't stop in time, their life force will be burned out and they will die. According to the introduction of this technique, the Sciention true chi of an early-stage Sciention realm warrior can only burn for 7 breaths before it is exhausted. Once the life force is burned for more than 3 breaths, it must be stopped in time. Otherwise, there is the possibility of the life force drying up and dying. At that time, even if he managed to turn the situation around, it would be difficult for him to escape death. From the looks of it, using this technique would only allow one to unleash 10 breaths of power at most. After 10 breaths of time, one would definitely die. That Huang he clearly cultivated this great essence ignition technique. Unfortunately, he didn't even have the time to use it before he died. By the Ziwa, he thought to himself. Then he memorized the skill. The way to use the grand ignition technique was extremely simple. As long as one understood some of the key points, they would be able to use it smoothly. He only needed to read it once to memorize it. As for this cultivation technique, there was no distinction between entry and exit, and it was destined to be a cultivation technique that very few people would use. This was because once it was used, one would either die or be severely injured. Some people had never used it in their entire lives. However, this restriction doesn't seem to have much effect on me. If I can recover my innate true chi by consuming my soul energy, does that mean that as long as my soul energy doesn't run out, I can continue to use the great energy ignition technique to fight without harming his own life? Suddenly, Ziyue's face revealed a thoughtful expression, and he was eager to give it a try. Of course, this was just a thought. If he hadn't encountered a strong enemy that he couldn't resist, he wouldn't have taken this risk. However, in his heart, he couldn't help but treat this thought as a trump card. Perhaps at a critical moment, it could be used to turn the situation around. A day later, Ziyue's figure appeared in a rocky cave. Now, I should be at the border between the Wu country and the Deqian country. If everything goes smoothly, I will be able to step into the Deqian country in another day's time. Then, in another half a month, I'll be able to reach the swamp of the remote Cloud Mountain and take the opportunity to step into the Chaoyang sect. Baizue secretly compared it to the map, and his mood gradually became better. However, before that, it's time for me to ignite the 5-direction spiritual apertures and officially start cultivating the 5-direction pure yuan technique. With this thought in mind, Ziyue didn't hesitate, and his mental power surged. In the blink of an eye, 5 treasures appeared beside him. Blazing fire heart-burning spear, first yuan heavy water, void spirit gold crystal, earth spirit jade soil, and 1,000-year willow heart. He glanced at the 5 treasures that contained the 5 elements innate chi. Ziyue first picked up the void spirit gold crystal, and with a thought, a strong suction force was generated. In an instant, the innate gold spirit chi sealed in the void spirit gold crystal turned into a stream of light and rushed into his body. Suppressing the urge to refine the innate gold chi, he immediately controlled the special spiritual chi and directed it towards one of the acupoints in his body. Buzz! The aperture, which was originally closed, trembled slightly. The moment it felt the natural spiritual chi, it instinctively opened a corner. In an instant, an endless stream of innate gold spirit chi poured into it. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, the aperture was like a bottomless pit, constantly devouring the innate gold spirit chi, until Ziyue felt that the innate gold spirit chi contained in the void spirit gold crystal was about to dry up. Buzz! A faint golden light suddenly flashed in the aperture, and the closed aperture was completely opened. Then a strong suction force was generated. The innate gold spirit chi in the void spirit gold crystal in Ziyue's hand was quickly consumed. The void spirit gold crystal had lost its original spiritual chi, and Ziyue gently pinched it, and it turned into powder and scattered on the ground. The innate gold spirit chi has been ignited. Slightly excited, Ziyue did not stop, and immediately picked up the Millennium Willow Heart. Just like before, a green light flashed in his body, and another acupoint was ignited. Then the first Yuan Heavy Water, Heart-Burning Spear, Earth Spirit Gui 2. Half an hour later, there was a pile of debris on the ground. The 5 treasures were also destroyed and lost their functions. Only then did Ziyue let out a long sigh of relief, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. The 5 direction spiritual apertures, the 5 elements apertures have all been ignited. Feeling the 5 glittering acupoints in his body, an indescribable excitement arose in his heart. The next step is the most crucial one. The circulation of spiritual qi, according to the cultivation route of the 5-direction pure yuan technique, will gradually purify the spiritual qi through the 5-direction spiritual apertures and transform it into the vital essence of an enlightening realm cultivator. Ziyue's heart trembled, and he directly lit 3 tranquil incense in the cave. His mind was calm, and the spiritual qi began to circulate. Time flowed like water, and in the blink of an eye, the next day dawned. Ziyue slowly opened his eyes, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. It is indeed effective. My spiritual qi, which had been stagnant, has finally begun to grow again. And most importantly, the purity of my spiritual qi has indeed increased. Although the increase was not much, it was because he had just started cultivating. As he cultivated the 5-direction pure yuan technique to initial success, great success, and perfection, the purity of his spiritual qi would naturally increase to an astonishing level. With spiritual qi in a liquid state, it was not impossible for it to be comparable to a real, enlightening realm cultivator. As such, the strength of my immortal technique has finally begun to increase again. However, according to tonight's cultivation progress, I should need at least half a month's time before I can cultivate the 5-direction pure yuan technique to initial success. Ziyue glanced at the attributes panel and saw that the cultivation progress of the 5-direction pure yuan technique had already become uninitiated 7%. He could not help but sigh in his heart. The Wu country and the Deqian country were neighbors, and it was almost impossible for there to be no friction between them. However, because of the political marriage 10 years ago, and the real threat was the northern barbarian kingdom. As such, the conflicts between the two sides had been reduced to the lowest. At most, there would be small-scale conflicts and drills every day, and deaths were extremely rare. Ziyue rode on the little black dog and successfully crossed the border between the two countries without encountering any accidents. Perhaps it was because they were neighbors, or perhaps it was because they belonged to the same region, but Ziyue saw that there was not much difference between the two countries. At most, there would be some differences in customs, which would only be revealed during special festivals. Naturally, it would be difficult to tell during normal events. Therefore, in the following period of time, Ziyue traveled during the day and spent the night in the wilderness or found a mountain village and a small town to tidy up. The journey was not slow. During this period, he naturally did not idle around. What he cultivated the most was the 5-direction pure yuan technique. After 5 days, he had already raised the cultivation progress to 30%, and he was only 10 days away from initial success. Although it was slightly lower than expected, it was not considered slow. The effect was naturally very obvious. Ziyue could clearly feel that the degree of condensation of his spiritual qi had increased by at least 10% compared to before. The same type of magic, such as the spirit fire technique, originally could last for 10 breaths of time, but now it needed 11 breaths of time to extinguish. Furthermore, the power of the burning was even more powerful. Its might could be said to be astonishing. He was satisfied with this, but he did not put all his thoughts on the cultivation of the 5-direction pure yuan technique. The path of cultivation was a process that took months and years to complete. He could not be too relaxed, and naturally, he could not be too crazy. He had to be flexible and let nature take its course. Therefore, Ziyue would stop for a period of time when he felt irritated and bored during cultivation. Then he would start cultivating the 9 revolutions innate skill. Compared to the 5-direction pure yuan technique, the 9 revolutions innate technique was a more time-consuming process. The whole route of the 9 revolutions innate technique required at least an hour of cultivation, and it often required 3 cycles of cultivation before the progress on the attribute panel increased by 1 point. After 5 days, the progress of the 9 revolutions' innate technique was only raised to 7% of initial success. It was estimated that there were still 2 to 3 months before initial success. However, the process of being able to feel the growth and purification of his genuine chi made him feel happy and fulfilled, and he enjoyed it. In addition to these 2 cultivation methods, Ziyue naturally would not neglect the cultivation of martial arts and magic arts. Initial success of the great immortal martial handprint, 93%, and treasure stabilizing divine light, 15%, were the results of his cultivation during this period. Chapter 271. There were 9 counties and 13 cities in the Great Qian country, and each county was extremely large. After 5 days of traveling, Ziyue took the opportunity to step into the area of Qingqing County. Under the setting sun, the world seemed to be a little red. A man and a dog slowly walked out from between the mountains. My luck is not bad. I actually came across a village. Ziyue glanced around, but the black puppy had already approached with cheerful steps. After an entire day of traveling, even the black puppy seemed to be a little tired. However, soon, a strange expression appeared on Ziyue's face. There was something strange about this village. As expected, it's empty. As they approached the entrance of the village, Ziyue had a look of realization on his face, but his heart sank. If it was an ordinary, abandoned, ancient village, even if it seemed a little desolate and dilapidated, it definitely wouldn't be like this village, where there were still traces of people living here. On the ground and in the open space, he could even see some clothes that were hung out to dry. The doors of every house were wide open, but there weren't even chickens, ducks, cows, or dogs. Ziyue looked at the ground. There were 3 or 4 spears and 1 or 2 long sabers scattered messily on the ground, but there wasn't any trace of blood left. It doesn't seem like they encountered bandits or robbers, but more like evil. Ziyue's expression instantly became serious. At this moment, he naturally knew that the so-called evil was either a ghost, a demon, or some kind of spiritual monster. Of course, it could also be man-made. Among the immortal cultivators, there was also a group of people who walked on the path of demonic cultivation. Strictly speaking, the Qinghe town's 5th channel chief who died his hands back then was a demonic cultivator, and the corpse ghost sect he came from was naturally a demonic sect. The disaster here could also be the doing of such existences. However, even if a demonic cultivator did it, it's unlikely that he would destroy the corpses to such a serious extent. Therefore, it's more likely that it's a demonic ghost or something like that. Ziyue thought to himself as he slowly stepped into the village. Here, he faintly sensed an extremely faint stench, which was obviously the remnants of something that had caused mischief. The village wasn't big, and there were about 100 or so households. Ziyue walked around and didn't discover much. After thinking for a while, he decided that there was nothing to worry about. He went straight to a rich family in the village. There was still more than half of the open rice vat. A rice ladle fell to the ground, spilling a pile of rice. It would appear that the evil spirit had coincidentally made its move when the villagers were washing rice and preparing their meals, and directly abducted the entire village. That aura should be extremely powerful. Even the rats were so scared that they didn't dare to approach this place for 3 days. Ziyue shook his head and sighed, but there was nothing he could do. The tracking spell that he was good at was a spell that used a hidden tracking mark to achieve the goal of tracking. It was impossible to track down such a powerful evil that had already left for 3 days. Not to mention, it was hard to tell how strong this kind of evil spirit was. If it was not necessary, he would not provoke it. The next day, just as the sun had risen, Ziyue and the black puppy set off again. 1 hour later, Ziyue's expression changed. Another village has been swept away? Looking at the village that was not much smaller than the previous one, and the words of the Li's village could still be seen clearly on the lantern at the head of the village, Ziyue's heart sank, and his expression became stern. The 3rd one, the 4th one, Ziyue urged the black puppy, and the more he walked, the more his heart sank. This was originally a place where people came and went, but the area within a radius of dozens of miles had become a barren land. This was only what he had discovered. How many more had he not discovered? Caw! Caw! Suddenly, two huge bird cries were heard. Zue quickly raised his head, and his eyes narrowed. In the sky, two huge red-crowned cranes, whose wings were more than 10 meters wide, were soaring rapidly in the void. On the backs of these two red-crowned cranes, there were two youths riding on them. As they fluttered in the wind, they looked indescribably carefree and at ease. Immortal spell cultivators, and they must be the elite disciples of some immortal spell sects. Almost in an instant, Zue came to a conclusion. Then, deep in his heart, he could not help but feel envious, riding red-crowned cranes and flying in the void. Although he could use the 100 steps wave-treading skill to walk in the air for a short period of time, in fact, he could only walk at a low altitude. After 100 steps, he would need to borrow strength from the ground. As for the eagle swordsman painting on his body, although he could also drive the eagle to fly in the void, the duration was very limited. It could not be compared to these two people who could fly freely and freely in the void. These two people seemed to have discovered Zue's trace. The red-crowned cranes whistled, and their postures were indescribably graceful. They directly flew towards him. Then, they landed at a place dozens of meters away from Zue. The two red-crowned cranes were as graceful as fairies. They looked like princesses of a kingdom and were indescribably arrogant and noble. Their light purple eyes glanced at the black puppy that by Zue was sitting on. Then, they put on an indifferent look and showed an indescribable contempt. Oh, whoa! The black puppy's eyes widened. It seemed to be curious and envious. It licked its face and was about to go closer. However, the two red-crowned cranes were extremely disdainful of the black puppy. They looked as if they could not be bothered to be associated with it. They lifted their fiery red feet and went a few meters away. The black puppy ignored them and went closer again. Then, as if it remembered something, it patted its ears with its paw and quickly poured out a few blood coagulation elixirs. It looked very hospitable. During this period, Zue would give it 3 blood coagulation elixirs every other day as its food. It could not bear to swallow them all at once, so it saved one every day. It did not expect it to be willing to take it out at this time. The two red-crowned cranes glanced at it curiously and seemed to be a little disdainful. They minded their own business and walked a few steps away from the black puppy. Woof, woof. The black puppy's pride was a little hurt. It immediately tried to cozy up to them, looking listless. Ah, bootlicker, Zue chuckled. He could tell that these two red-crowned cranes were not ordinary. They were high-level mutated beasts. Although they were not as good as the black puppy, they could soar in the sky. They were really rare mounts. Then, Zue looked at the two young men who floated down from the red-crowned cranes. The two of them were dressed in Taoist robes and were filled with spiritual energy. The spiritual pressure that was faintly emitted from their bodies was very strong. They were at the 8th and 9th level of the Qi refining stage, respectively. So, with a fellow Taoist, I am Zhao Ziyun of the Kunwi Sword Sect. Beside me is my junior brother Guhao. They are both working at the Immortal Cultivation Pavilion of the Qingsheng County. How should I address you? Do you know about the recent demon disaster in the Twin Camel Peaks? The leading young man, who had obviously reached the 9th level of the Qi refining stage, bowed slightly and asked, I am Ziyue. I am an itinerant cultivator. Actually, I just arrived nearby. I only know that there is not a single person in the village within a few dozen miles. As for the specific reason, I do not know. Now, it seems that fellow Taoist, Zhao, knows something. Ziyue pondered for a moment and said, although he was dressed as a martial artist, he did not deliberately hide the fact that he was an immortal cultivation cultivator. Therefore, it was easy for others to see through him. Actually, this was what he had planned for a long time. He came to the Great Qian Nation this time to join the Morning Sun sect, a large immortal cultivation sect. It was more suitable for him to travel as an immortal cultivation cultivator than as a martial artist. There are countless spiritual beings in the world. There are always some beasts that turn into beasts and demons. These demons cannot change their nature and live on meat. Naturally, there are some that devour human flesh. Many of the demons that cause trouble are dealt with by the immortal cultivation pavilion. However, it is different this time. Some demon beasts, when they reach a certain level, will transform and become spiritual demons. It is equivalent to us enlightening our immortal cultivation apertures. Humans are the leader of all living beings and are born with great intelligence. Some demon beasts hope to transform into spiritual demons by devouring humans. From fellow Taoist description, the number of casualties is not small. I reckon that this time, it is very likely that there is a demon that is about to break through and become a spiritual demon. Therefore, we have to find it as soon as possible and eliminate it. Zhao Ziyun said with a serious expression, "Fellow Taoist Bai, your strength is not low. I wonder if you are willing to eliminate this demon with us?" Gu Hao, who was at the side, looked at Ziyue and felt that his strength was not low, but he still suggested, "Forget about me. I am just an itinerant cultivator and my strength is low. I will not cause trouble for you two fellow Taoists. Moreover, I still have to hurry and cannot stay here for long." Ziyue shook his head. If he encountered the demon disaster head-on and knew that he had the ability to deal with it, it was not a big deal for him to get rid of it. Previously, when he was hurrying, there was a malicious spirit causing trouble in a house. He had also casually collected it into the soul-gathering banner and turned it into nourishment for the other primary souls. But this time, since the immortal Ascension Pavilion was involved, and this demon could step into the spiritual realm at any time, he naturally did not want to interfere. From fellow Taoist's accent, you should be from the southern region of Wu country. The spiritual energy in your body is purple. If I am not wrong, you are cultivating the purple Qi divine observation technique of the Chaoyang sect. Since fellow Taoist calls himself an itinerant cultivator and is in a hurry, you must be heading towards a swamp of the remote Cloud Mountain, hoping to join the Chaoyang sect and obtain the subsequent cultivation method. At this moment, Zhao Ziyun suddenly spoke. Seeing that Ze did not deny it, he could not help but continue. "Since that is the case, I feel that fellow Taoists should go with us. Because this time, other than Junior Gu and I, Chaoyang Sect Yang and Ding Mao are also coming along. At that time, we can guarantee that fellow Taoists will get 2 recommendation letters from them. Fellow Taoists can also get to know them. If you can gain their recognition, it will be beneficial for you to enter the Chaoyang sect in the future." That's right, especially senior brother Yu Yang. He is the grandson of the Chaoyang sect's 3rd elder and is also the disciple of Master Immortal Guangqin. His position in the Chaoyang sect is not low. With his recommendation, you will naturally receive more attention than if you were to travel thousands of miles alone. Gu Hao also opened his mouth to persuade. Chapter 272. Oh, Ziyue pondered for a moment, then quickly agreed. As the saying goes, having someone in the court makes things easier. If he had a letter of recommendation, it would be much better for him. After all, he was unfamiliar with this place, and he was not the kind of person who would refuse to use a letter of recommendation even though he knew that it would help him. This was not a form of flattery, but a normal interaction. Furthermore, if he really met with danger, he was confident that even if he could not defeat them, it would not be difficult for him to escape. Even if he could not defeat them, he should be able to outrun the others. Seeing this, Zhao Ziyun smiled, not surprised at all. He then said, "Let's go, I have a technique that can track things. I want to see what kind of beast is behind this demon disaster." With that, the group of people quickly arrived at a village that had been plundered. Senior brother Zhao's 1,000 miles tracking technique is superb. Gu Hao smiled at Ziyue and encouraged him. Dua nodded silently, secretly remembering the name of this technique. This 1,000 miles tracking technique was obviously a better technique than the tracking technique that he had mastered. If he had the chance, he would naturally want to master it. A strong wave of mental energy immediately spread out. Then, Ziyue felt a huge wave of spiritual energy coming from Zhang Ziyun's body. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths, after a full 5 breaths. Buzz! A layer of inexplicable fluctuation rippled out. Follow! Zhao Ziyun's eyes moved, as if he had seen something. He shouted and jumped onto the crane. Naturally, Gu Hao also climbed onto the back of the red-crowned crane. As for Ziyue, he rode on the dog's back. Caw! The crane let out a low cry and instantly turned into a beautiful arc, flying into the distance. The black puppy hurriedly followed, its speed very fast. The three of them followed the demon all the way. This 1,000 miles tracking technique was obviously very effective. Even after a few days, they could still easily identify the demon's aura and quickly get closer to the demon's location. In the blink of an eye, an hour had passed. During this time, Zhao Ziyun used the 1,000 miles tracking technique twice, and the group quickly arrived at a mountain ridge. The sounds of battle could be heard from afar. Vaguely, they could hear dense, screeching noises. "It's Yu Yang and Ding Mao." Zhao Ziyun gave a low shout, and the immortal crane took the lead and flew over. Gu Hao followed closely behind. The red-crowned crane turned into a beautiful arc and passed through the mountain ridge, approaching the battlefield. Spirit energy +7, +8, +7, +6. Ziyue's eyes flashed across his status panel. The rapid increase in his spirit energy surprised him. He quickly patted the black puppy's head and said in a low voice, "Follow me." The black puppy stretched its body, and its 4 limbs became strong and powerful. It quickly leaped between the mountain ridges. After a few breaths of time, Ziyue's pupils constricted and his expression changed. On the ground, the mountain was filled with mountain rats. Each of them was the size of a wild rabbit, and there seemed to be no end to their numbers. In the middle of the mountain rats, there were a total of 6 people, including Zhao Ziyun and Gu Hao. Each of them used their own methods to attack the group of mountain rats. Looking at the scene in front of him, the black puppy's body trembled and its footsteps became hesitant. "Be smart and find a place to hide." Bai Ziyue patted him on the head and leaped out in a flash. He stretched out his palm, and an incomparably huge palm print condensed in the void. It mightily crashed down. Boom! With a loud bang, at least a few hundred of the mountain rats in the palm print were all turned into mud. Layers of densely packed spirit energy values flashed in front of his eyes. Although the individual increase was not much, when hundreds of them were added together, it increased his spirit energy by more than 3,000. Excited, Yue added a spirit light shield to himself, and at the same time, struck out with his palm again. Boom! With a sweep of his hand, a large number of mountain rats were swept away. "Who is this fellow Taoist?" A tall and thin immortal Dharma cultivator looked at by Ziyue emotionally as he made his move. "Fellow Taoist Gong, this is fellow Taoist Bai. We met him on the way here. He is currently a loose cultivator, but he cultivates the purple Qi divine observation technique and wants to join the Chaiyang sect. We heard that Senior Brother Yu and Senior Brother Ding were here. He volunteered to come." Zhao Ziyun said quickly. His expression was still rather relaxed. His flying sword swung out like a flash of light, piercing through the mountain rats one by one. Then, he continued to introduce, "This is fellow Taoist Gong Fei. He comes from the Tao Accomplishment Sect and is at the 7th level of the Qi refining stage. This is fellow Taoist Lu Jixuan. He is 1 level higher than us and is also a disciple of the Tao Accomplishment Sect. He is at the 8th level of the Qi refining stage. As for the other 2, they are Senior Brother Yu Yang and Senior Brother Ding Mao from the Chaiyang sect. They are both at the 9th level of the Qi refining stage and are in the immortal cultivation stage. Their strength is astonishing." Ziyue did not care about the mistakes in Zhao Ziyun's words. As he attacked, he quickly scanned the group. Gong Fei was the weakest, but he held a 5-element square seal in his hand. Every time he used the square seal, it would turn into a huge rock and smash a large group of rats to death. Occasionally, he would use 1 or 2 talismans, which were very powerful. The ground was covered in blood and flesh. It was very terrifying. Lu Jixuan, on the other hand, used a high-grade magic item, the Frost Gourd. It emitted a cold air that was cold and fierce. Almost all the mountain rats that were within the range of the gourd's mouth could not escape the fate of being frozen solid. As for Yu Yang and Ding Mao, they were dressed as young Taoists. The two of them controlled their flying swords and used the Chaoyang sword technique. Two streaks of sword light pierced through the air, completely ignoring the surrounding mountain rats. Instead, they headed straight for a gigantic rat king that was golden in color and as tall as two people when it stood up. The rat king let out a long squeak, and a layer of golden light appeared on the surface of its body. However, at this moment, countless mountain rats scuttled on the ground like moths to a flame. They continuously collided with the sword light, using their flesh and blood to block the attack for the Rat King. In the end, the two flying swords could only slightly stab the golden light, causing the golden light to tremble slightly. Senior brother Yu, how did you guys end up in this rat nest? Could it be that the Rat King is the cause of this demon disaster? Gu Hao raised a defensive light shield, and a spell was instantly formed. Golden needles shot out like shooting stars. Puff, puff, puff. The densely packed golden needles pinned a large group of mountain rats to death on the ground. However, the mountain rats in the cave seemed to be endless. They continuously rushed out, numbering in the tens of thousands. It was truly frightening. We don't know the specifics, but we saw human bones here. It was clearly the work of these beasts. We've only killed a few blind ones, and countless mountain rats have already rushed out of the cave. You saw what happened next. Lu Zixuan quickly replied. Is that so? Zhao Ziyan replied. His mental power surged, and a strong wave of spiritual energy spread out. To catch bandits, first catch the king. Let's kill that rat demon first. We can definitely break through this rat tide. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The Rat King let out a long squeak, and countless mountain rats rushed toward Zhao Ziyan. There was no lack of huge mutated rats among them. There were even rat demons. Ziyue stretched out his hand, and an orange-red flame shot out like lightning. Puff! The flame spread, and countless mountain rats were burned to ashes amidst their miserable cries. Then, Ziyue's mental power surged, and he patted his waist. Buzz! A flying sword immediately shot out like a sharp sword. Chaoyang's swordsmanship. The swordsmanship was profound, and it directly pierced through the group of mutated rats and rats. Almost none of the mountain rats could block it. At this moment, Zhao Ziyun's spell finally came to fruition. Dark clouds rolled in the void, and lightning flashed within them. Whoosh! A bolt of lightning as thick as an arm came crashing down. Sensing the familiar wave of spiritual energy, Ziyue's face couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. Lightning fall. What Zhao Ziyun was using right now was the lightning descent technique. However, compared to Ziyue's lightning fall, Zhao Ziyun's lightning fall was much weaker, and its destructive power was naturally not as strong as before. At the same time, the others gave up on attacking the low-level mountain rats, and all of them rushed towards the Rat King. Squeak! The Rat King screeched, and immediately, countless mountain rats blocked its path. The 5 elements square seal blasted out, and the wall of mountain rats shook slightly. A large number of them died, but they were quickly replaced. Boom! Thunder and lightning roared and crashed down. The rat wall, which was already heavily damaged, was directly blasted apart, revealing the figure of the Rat King behind it. At this moment, a total of 4 flying swords flashed with a sharp light as they shot out. The Rat King roared, as if it had sensed the danger at this moment. Its body glowed brightly, and it spat out its demon core. Boom! 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 The flying swords were as fast as lightning, and all of them landed on the layer of golden light, shattering that layer of defense. Then, the flying swords collided with the demon core, and it was like metal clashing, and the flying sword were all knocked away. Whoosh! At this moment, the second bolt of lightning struck the demon core. The demon core trembled, and its spiritual light dimmed, causing the Rat King's body to become unstable. It seemed to have sensed the danger at this moment, and immediately began to flee. However, Just as it was about to recall the demon core and escape, a pale white light suddenly descended and landed on the demon core. Instantly, the demon core paused for a moment. At this critical moment, Ziyue made his move. Magic art, treasure stabilizing divine light. Although he had yet to learn the basics of this spell, its ability to immobilize treasures was strange and powerful. Even though it only caused the Rat King to pause for a moment, this moment was the difference between victory and defeat, life and death. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous lightning strikes landed on the demon core. Yu Yang, Ding Mao, and the others also made their moves at this critical moment, and once again shot out their flying swords towards the Rat King. Poof, poof. Chapter 273. Puffed. A flying sword pierced through the Rat King's heart. A flying sword spun around its head and directly cut off its head. Naturally, the demon core lost its momentum and drooped slightly before being quickly put away by Yu Yang. With the Rat King dead, the rat swarm that had gathered together began to panic. They could no longer gather as much power as before. Ziyue and the others attacked separately. Dharma artifacts, spells, and all sorts of area of effect attacks rained down on the rats. As the saying goes, evil must be eradicated. The threat of these rats was equally great. If left alone, another rat demon king would be born in a few years' time. After half an hour, they had not completely wiped out the rats. After all, these mountain rats were too small. Furthermore, they were in the cave, which spread out in all directions. It was difficult to eliminate them one by one. However, most of the mountain rats, especially those that had evolved into mutated beasts, had already been eliminated. At least, this place would be safe for 30 years. As expected, this is a small node of the spirit vein. This group of mountain rats naturally grew at a very fast speed within the nodes of the spirit vein. Ding Mao felt the fluctuation of spirit qi in the surroundings. In the depths of the cave, he plucked a few spiritual materials. These spiritual materials were neither expensive nor cheap. They were worth dozens or hundreds of spirit stones. Of course, the real harvest this time was the rat demon's corpse and demon core. Zhao, Ziyun, and the others had temporarily stored them in their storage pouches. They would divide them later. This node of the spirit vein is too small. At most, it can only radiate a radius of about 10 meters. It can't even open up a moo of spirit land. Otherwise, it would be a source of income. Guhao smiled. Spirit vein nodes were as large as Dongxian City Market. They could be used for enlightened, immortal masters to cultivate. They could radiate a radius of a few hundred meters and open up 50 mu of spirit land to build a market. Small ones were like this one in the cave. Only the Rat King benefited. Its strength was comparable to a 9th level Qi refinement cultivator. Beside it, there were only 2 newly formed rat demons and dozens of mutated rodent beasts. Although the Rat King has been eliminated, the surrounding demon disaster was not caused by this Rat King. At this moment, Zhao Ziyan spoke. That's right. Although this rat demon isn't weak, it relies more on the power of the rat pack. However, it's impossible for them to kidnap all the villagers within a radius of tens of miles without making a sound. Yu Yang chimed in. Looks like our opponent this time isn't simple. He actually knows how to stir up trouble. Every time he made a move, he would deliberately pass by this place and leave 1 or 2 villagers behind. As Zhao Ziyan spoke, he had already guessed the reason why they had been lured to this place. Mental energy surged once again as he executed the 1,000-mile tracking technique. After circling the area once, he instantly looked towards the sky and said, "This monster obviously has the ability to fly." After coming here, it flew straight into the void. As he spoke, he summoned the red-crowned crane back. Soon, he hopped onto the red-crowned crane and hovered in the air. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. "I found something. Should we chase after it? Let's give chase. This rat demon alone won't be able to complete the mission of the Immortal Pavilion." As Yu Yang spoke, his mental strength surged. The bag of holding on his waist opened, and a small boat Dharma artifact appeared. Spiritual energy surged, and the boat expanded in the wind. Soon, it turned into a flying ship that could accommodate 4 to 5 people. It was only then that Ziyuan noticed that other than him, there were 4 other people who had storage bags. They were Yu Yang, Ding Mao, Zhao Ziyun, and Gu Hao. As for Gong Fei and Lu Zixuan from the Dao Accomplishment Sect, neither of them had storage bags. Obviously, other than the factor of strength, the accumulation of this sect was probably not as good as the Chaoyang sect and the Kunwu Sword sect. Yu Yang gestured for the few of them to board the flying ship. Then, he looked towards Ziyue and expressed his goodwill. "Fellow Taoist Bai, if you don't mind, you can board as well." "Thank you." Ziyue nodded and called out to the black puppy to follow him. Then, he hopped onto the flying ship. Hence, under the lead of the 2 red-crowned cranes, the flying ship soared and easily caught up. On the ground, the black puppy was running wildly. This flying ship is already considered a spiritual artifact, right? Bai Ziyue sized up the entire flying ship with a look of shock. Although the flying ship was not big, it was overflowing with light. He could sense that there were more than 81 restrictions on it. It had exceeded the limit of 81 restrictions on a Dharma artifact. It's not a spiritual artifact. In fact, it's only a superior grade Dharma artifact. The reason why there's so many restrictions is because its body is bigger and is made up of many parts. That's why it can engrave more restrictions. Of course, in terms of cost, this flying ship is not inferior to an inferior grade spiritual artifact. In terms of speed, it should be comparable to a cultivator who has just entered the Aperture Awakening realm. Yu Yang explained with a smile. "Senior brother Yu, you're too humble. This Purple Wood Cosmos ship is made up of a total of 36 parts. Each part can be engraved with restrictions. Although it's not a high grade, it's sealed with a second stage Dharma spell, the Gale Escape Technique. Once it's activated, even a cultivator in the Aperture Awakening realm can only eat dust behind it," Ding Mao said with a hint of envy on his face. The other people's faces were also filled with envy. Although they wanted such a life-saving item that was comparable to a spiritual artifact, they could not afford it. After all, not everyone had Yu Yang's background and a grandfather who was an elder in the Chaoyang sect. Yu Yang smiled and didn't explain himself. "By the way, fellow Taoist Bai, the Dharma spell you used just now seemed to have some magical properties. What is it?" "Of course, if it's not convenient for you to say, I won't force you." Ding Mao seemed to have thought of something and asked. "That's right. It's hard to believe that fellow Taoist Bai is already at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. Also, that palm print seems to have some magical properties. It's not simple at all." At this moment, Gong Fei's eyes flashed, and he also asked. "That Dharma spell is called the Treasure Stabilizing Divine Light. I obtained it by accident. It only has some auxiliary effects and does not have any destructive power. It's nothing. As for that palm print, it's actually a martial art technique. Itinerant cultivators like me practice whatever they can get their hands on. Whether it's Dharma spells or martial arts, I practice both. I can't compare to all of you who come from famous sections." Ziyue smiled humbly and gave a simple introduction. "Is that so? However, it's rare to see someone like fellow Taoist Bai among itinerant cultivators. If not for the fact that fellow Taoist cultivates the purple Qi visualization technique, I would have invited fellow Taoist Bai to join my Taoist sect. Although my Taoist sect can't compare to the Chaoyang sect, I'm still the sect master's disciple. It's not impossible for me to introduce fellow Taoist Bai to the sect master." Gong Fei's eyes flashed, and he spoke with even more enthusiasm. "Junior brother Gong, you're going too far. Fellow Taoist Bai is destined to be a member of my Chuyang sect. Perhaps he was planted by one of my martial uncles during his travels. He's not someone you can rope in with just a few words." Yu Yang's face turned solemn as he spoke. The Chaoyang sect had always had a rule of 3 years of travel for enlightened immortal masters. During their travels, they would naturally pass down their techniques to those who had the aptitude for immortal spells. Over the years, the Chaoyang sect had taken in many disciples because of this. Lu Zixuan could not help but look at Gong Fei strangely. "I'm just saying," Gong Fei replied expressionlessly. All this while, I've been cultivating the purple chi divine observation technique. Naturally, I like to cultivate the subsequent techniques. I can only accept fellow Taoist Gong's good intentions. Ziyue also felt a little strange, but he still replied politely. With fellow Taoist Bai's strength, as long as you have a clean background, it's actually not difficult for you to join my Qiyang sect. How about this? I have a piece of mysterious jade. When you meet Steward Zhang from the Internal Affairs Hall, give it to him. You should give me some face. Yu Yang revealed a satisfied smile as he spoke to Ziyue. It's fate that brought us together. Since fellow Taoist Bai wants to join my Chaoyang sect, we'll be brothers in the future. I'll also write you a letter so that you won't be troubled by despicable people. When Ding Mao saw this, he also spoke enthusiastically. As he spoke, he quickly took out a blank jade slip from his storage bag and left a message on it. He also infused his spiritual aura into it and handed it to Ziyue. Thank you, senior brothers. Ziyue reached out to take the items from the two of them and thanked them profusely. Although it was definitely because of the strength that he had displayed previously, which made the two of them take him seriously, he was still grateful that they were willing to help him with the recommendation. We're here. Get ready. At this moment, a light shout came from the two immortal cranes not far away. Immediately, everyone's heart skipped a beat as they landed on a flat ground. In the distance, there was a small village. Everyone was stunned and could not help but look at Zhao Ziyan strangely. This village was very small, with only about 30 households. However, the people inside were all well and even seemed to be peaceful. With the ferocity of the evil spirit, if it was really in this village, how could it let these people go? Although I do not know why this place is completely undamaged, the aura of that evil is the densest in this place. If my guess is correct, his lair should be in this vicinity. As Zhao Ziyun spoke, a resolute expression appeared on his face. I'm very confident in my 1,000-mile tracking technique. All right, then let's enter the village and see what this evil spirit is. Yu Yang said, and stepped out of the purple wood Qinquan ship. Following closely behind, Ziyue and the rest also jumped out of the ship and landed on the flat ground. There was no need to say anything. Everyone immediately took out their immortal artifacts and prepared to activate them at the first moment. The evil spirit that was about to gain sentience might be on par with a level 9 Qi refining stage cultivator. However, due to its special constitution, its strength was often stronger than a level 9 Qi refining stage cultivator. None of them dared to be careless. Chapter 274. The village was not big, and there were only a few dozen households. Usually, the people who came and went were relatives from other villages or merchants who traveled from village to village. Therefore, when Bai Ziyue and his group approached, they almost immediately attracted the attention of the villagers. Many people looked at them timidly and did not dare to go forward, but they could not help but size them up. A gray-haired old man who looked like a village elder cautiously approached them and asked, "Young heroes, why have you come to Bitter Lotus Village?" Zhao Ziyin was just about to reply when his gaze suddenly froze, locking onto a figure in an instant. Under the 1,000-mile tracking spell, his eyes were filled with spiritual light. He could see special auras in the air that were difficult to detect. At this moment, he had discovered something. Ziyue and the others were all quick-witted. They immediately followed his gaze and saw a little girl. The little girl was no more than 5 or 6 years old. She was dressed in simple and shabby hem clothes that had been washed until they were white. Her little face was slightly tense, and her bright eyes looked at them curiously. However, what truly caught their attention was not the little girl. Instead, it was the orange kitten in her bosom. Demon. Cat demon. They did not expect to meet this demon so soon. However, when they looked at the crowd, their hearts sank. Although this cat demon had restrained its aura, everyone present was either a direct disciple of a sect, a disciple of the sect leader, or someone like Ziyue who had cultivated the spiritual eye technique to the level of magical instincts. Naturally, they could determine its identity. The only thing that comforted them was that this cat demon had not broken through to the psychic realm. However, the immortal pavilion is handling matters. Everyone back off. At this critical moment, Gu Hao roared. After a moment of hesitation, he immediately activated the flying sword in his hand. Although the others felt uncomfortable, they did not hesitate and activated their own attacks. The little girl was scared out of her wits. Her sparkling eyes were immediately filled with tears. She instinctively retreated, but she fell down. However, even so, she did not let go of the kitten, as if it was her best playmate. Meow. Right at this moment, the kitten suddenly stretched its body lazily and easily broke free from the little girl's embrace. A divine light flashed in its dark yellow eyes. In the blink of an eye, the cat demon turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the spot. Pung! Pung! The sharp claws of its forelimbs quickly slapped out, and the two flying swords that were as fast as lightning were directly slapped away. Kitty! The little girl sobbed softly, but her mouth suddenly opened wide. It was as if she had never expected that the kitten she had raised would be so fierce. The surrounding villagers seemed to be stunned by such a big change. They hurriedly ran out of the village. So fast, Ding Mao's heart skipped a beat. He calmly reached into his bosom and took out a talisman. Whoosh! Activating the talisman, a grayish light shot towards the cat demon. Qianjun talisman. The moment the talisman appeared, the cat demon's originally swift speed immediately slowed down, as if it was bearing a heavy weight. Zhao Zun, Gu Hao, Yu Yang, and the rest immediately seized the opportunity and activated their respective Dharma artifacts. Ziyue also took out his own Dharma artifact. In a flash, he disappeared from the spot and quickly appeared in front of the cat demon. Meow! An enraged cat cry rang out. Instantly, the initially cute and skinny cat demon expanded. In the blink of an eye, it expanded by 1,000 times. It was like a ferocious beast filled with a berserk aura. At the same time, streaks of scarlet demon chi quickly surged out, forming a spiral-like demon chi shield. Boom! 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 One attack after another landed on the demonic chi shield, but the power of the attacks was continuously reduced. When the attacks landed on the shield, they only caused the shield to dim slightly. However, at this moment, everyone's second wave of attacks landed. Talismans were activated one after another. Ice arrows, flames, wind blades, all of them landed on the demon chi shield. Boom! In an instant, the heavens and earth exploded. Finally, the shield could not hold on any longer and collapsed. Streaks of ice blades and flames landed on the cat demon's huge body, causing its fur to curl slightly. Cat, cat! Behind the cat demon, the little girl screamed, her small body trembling slightly. He's protecting her? Ziyue's face was slightly surprised. He felt extremely strange. A cat demon that had robbed and devoured countless humans was protecting a human? But at this moment, the cat demon could have dodged all of them. But in order to help the little girl block the attacks, he took them head on. Meow! The cat demon's hair stood on end. As scarlet demonic chi swirled, a mysterious change seemed to occur in his jade yellow eyes. Invisible ripples swiftly gushed out like waves. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Everyone immediately felt their heads sink as if they were about to fall asleep. Even though Ziyue's mind power was very strong, it was still momentarily dazed. Be careful. Ziyue suddenly realized that the cat demon had disappeared from the spot. Without thinking, he summoned his Dharma artifact flying sword. Chi! The flying sword pierced the cat demon's body directly, making a dull sound. This sword only pierced its body slightly and did not cause any fatal damage. However, this sword also made the cat demon's sneak attack fail. The others immediately came back to their senses. Yu Yang suddenly took out a black bracelet and attacked like a bolt of lightning. Donk! With a dull sound, the cat demon's body swayed, as if it was feeling dizzy. Ziyue found the right opportunity and suddenly threw out a rope. The rope flew out and expanded with the wind. In the blink of an eye, It expanded countless times and tied the cat demon up. Ziyue had obtained this rope from the D family cultivator he had killed back then. Because it was only a middle-grade Dharma artifact, it was very easy to refine. This time, he took advantage of the cat demon's dizziness and attacked, causing the cat demon's aura to stagnate slightly. Then his body swayed slightly and disappeared in an instant. He went to the little girl's side and hugged her slightly, bringing her back. Even though the cat demon had tried to protect her, who knew what would happen in a battle? At the end of the day, he was not a cold-hearted person. He could not bear to see the little girl die in an accident, so he kept her by his side to protect her. The others reacted quickly. A flying sword turned into a ray of light and pierced the cat demon's head. The 5-element square seal fell like a small mountain. Chila. Dark clouds gathered, and Zhao Ziyun's thunder fall technique took shape. Lightning bolts fell one after another. Boom, boom, boom. The cat demon screamed, and its body tensed up. The middle-grade Dharma artifact, the immortal binding rope, was immediately broken. However, at the same time, the thunder fall landed on its body. The various attacks also worsened its injuries. In the blink of an eye, the cat demon's aura weakened, and its appearance became extremely miserable. Chi. At this moment, Yu Yang attacked again. A flying sword turned into a ray of golden light. Poof! Like the last straw that broke the camel's back, the flying sword pierced through the cat demon's head. A loud bang was heard. The cat demon fell to the ground and lost its breath. Phew! It's finally dead. Gong Fei recalled his 5-element square seal and sighed softly. Although the cat demon was difficult to deal with, it wasn't too difficult to deal with. Gu Hao said in a relaxed tone, "Something's not right." Zhao Ziyun's face suddenly changed. He quickly realized that something was wrong. The others also felt their hearts skip a beat. They immediately sensed a weak aura moving quickly under the ground. A flying sword turned into a ray of light and pierced into the ground. At this moment, Ziyue made his move. Almost at the same time that the cat demon fell, Ziyue noticed a ray of red light burrowing into the ground. It was obvious that the red light was the demon pearl. In the face of death, the cat demon's soul left its body and escaped with the demon pearl. Meow. The flying sword fell, and the demon pearl's soul rushed out of the ground and into the sky. Like a bolt of lightning, it rushed out of the village. "You can't escape." Yu Yang roared, and the bracelet-like dermic weapon struck out again. A ray of light flashed on the demon pearl. It was so fast that it dodged the bracelet's attack. The two flying swords streaked across the sky at high speed, tearing through the air with a deafening sound. The demon pearl tried the same trick again. Just as it was about to dodge again, a ray of white light silently fell. Dermic powers. Treasure stabilizing divine light. Hum. In an instant, the monster core paused for a moment. Although it quickly broke through the restriction, the two flying swords also ruthlessly slammed into the scarlet monster core. Boom, boom. 2 explosions. The demon pearl dimmed slightly. The almost solid shadow of the cat demon swayed slightly, as if it was about to dissipate completely. Meow. At this time, the Yao Dan had just caught up to the villager of the Bitter Lotus village. A strange red light flashed. Ah no! A series of horrified screams rang out. In an instant, the essence of 7 or 8 people's flesh and blood was sucked dry and sucked into the demon cat's demon core. Instantly, the originally withered demon pearl seemed to have been greatly replenished, and it regained its light. Oomph! Ziyue's expression changed. His spiritual power surged, and in the blink of an eye, a dermic power was formed. Without a sound, a faint light flashed past at an extremely fast speed and landed directly on the monster core. Soul attack dermic power, stunned spirit spike. Meow. A shrill meow was heard as the cat demon's demon core instantly froze and fell from the void. At the same time, a ray of black light shot out from Ding Mao's hand and landed on the cat demon's demon pearl. Moving soul wave. This was also a soul attack dermic power. Immediately after Dermic weapon attacks, dermic spells, and talismans drown the demon pearl again. Chapter 275. Boom, boom, boom. The demonic soul dissipated in an instant. The demonic core seemed to be unable to withstand the powerful energy and shattered into dozens of pieces in the blink of an eye. Spiritual energy plus 9,999. Ziyue was slightly surprised as he scanned the stats panel. From the increase in spiritual energy, the cat demon strength had obviously reached a certain limit. It was only a step away from becoming psychic demon. However, although this step seemed close, it was actually the end of the world. However, it's normal for the cat demon to end up like this. Yu Yang, Zhao Ziyun, and the rest were all in the 8th and 9th level of the Qi refining stage. Just their status as elite disciples of the immortal cultivation sects is enough to show that they have a deep foundation and must have powerful trump cards. Let's not talk about the fact that it hasn't broken through to become a psychic demon. Even if it succeeds, the outcome won't be much different. Bai Ziwa thought to himself, but his eyes were fixed on Zhao Ziyun and Yu Yang. The two of them were holding a long spear and a small knife that were overflowing with spiritual light. They were both spirit tools. It was obvious that they had not used all their trump cards yet. However, from this battle, I could see exactly what level my strength is at. Even if I don't take into account the strength of the Xiantian stage, I should be stronger than all of them in terms of immortal cultivation techniques. Even if they have trump cards that they haven't used, I have many perfected level spells that I haven't used. Regardless of whether it's the Thousand Mountain Ice Blade technique, the Thunderfall technique, or the Ice Flame technique, they all have the power to kill the cat demon. Especially the Ice Flame technique. Even ordinary enlightened immortal cultivation techniques would not be able to withstand it. Bai Ziyue's heart sunk, but he immediately calmed down. For ordinary immortal cultivation cultivators, it was rare for them to be able to cultivate their spells to the perfected level like him. As the saying goes, spells can be understood. No matter how strong a Dharma artifact was, it was not as strong as spells. His spells, to a certain extent, had already transcended the boundaries of cultivation. This cat demon is indeed difficult to deal with. However, it still couldn't escape death and was killed by us. Gu Hao let out a long sigh and said in a relaxed manner, "Fortunately, fellow Taoist, I discovered it in time. Otherwise, if his demonic soul escaped with the demonic core, it would have been an even greater disaster." Zhao Ziyun smiled as he looked at Ziyue. "Even if I didn't do anything, I'm sure all of you would have been able to kill it easily." Ziyue said humbly. After that, things were simple. They dealt with the cat demon's corpse and recorded the losses. After paying a few hundred taels of silver as compensation, the villagers of Bitter Lotus Village were overjoyed. After asking around, they found out that the cat demon had not been in Bitter Lotus Village since the beginning. Instead, it was picked up by the little girl at the village entrance a year ago. The little girl's parents had both passed away, and she had been living with her uncle and aunt. Because she was a girl, her uncle and aunt were naturally harsh on her and were not good to her. Therefore, and the kitten were somewhat dependent on each other. In this disaster, her uncle and aunt died at the hands of the cat demon, and the little girl became an orphan. Moreover, because many of the villagers who had died this time were due to the cat demon by the little girl's side, some people could not help but look at her with some hatred. As they muttered softly, it was inevitable that they would call her a jinx and a jinx. The little girl sobbed as if she knew her fate. She was lonely and helpless. Fortunately, after interacting with her, Zhao Ziyun and the others found out that the little girl had the potential for immortal arts. To the masses of ordinary people, the aptitude for immortal techniques was extremely rare. It was rare to find one in 10,000 people. Therefore, all the major immortal arts sects valued people with immortal arts talent very much. Therefore, Yu Yang, Zhao Ziyun, Gong Fei, and the others started a fight for her. In the end, Zhao Ziyun spoke up and voluntarily gave up the gains from killing the cat demon and the rat demon. He also gave up some of the immortal cultivation pavilion's contribution points. Only then did he take the little girl, Zhao Yu into his sect. Ziyue hesitated for a moment, but did not say anything in the end. In fact, he did not know why, but he vaguely felt a trace of the special bloodline aura from the little girl. It was similar to the aura of the immortal master who had enlightened her apertures, Fan Qingyu. He thought about the sudden appearance of the cat demon and how it had always stayed by her side. Judging from the ferocity of the cat demon, it was obviously not close to her. If he guessed correctly, it was more likely that the cat demon wanted to rear her. It was just like how a smart animal would keep its food by its side for a period of time. The cat demon obviously wanted to break through completely and evolve into a psychic demon. That was why it started planning this a year ago. This period of time was probably a critical time for it. Therefore, it devoured a large number of humans to nourish itself. Perhaps in a few days, it would make a move on the little girl and swallow her whole. However, it did not expect to encounter Ziyue and the others. And its plan was for naught. Ziyue was a little hesitant because he found out about the little girl's uniqueness. However, after thinking about it, the Kunwu Sword sect was after all a great sect of immortal techniques. Its strength and foundation were extremely deep. It might be a good thing for the little girl's growth. Therefore, he did not say anything in the end. However, even though he did not say anything, the little girl seemed to be more certain of him. She timidly walked in front of Ziyue and said, "Big brother, let me follow you, okay?" "Follow me?" Ziyue was stunned. The others also looked surprised. Yue is very obedient. She knows how to wash clothes, cook, and gather pigweed. I don't want to follow that person. The little girl sobbed and tugged at Ziyue's sleeve. She's just not as handsome as fellow Taoist Bai. She's actually being disliked. Zhao Ziyan laughed, then looked at Ziyue and said, "It seems that our Kunwu Sword sect is not fated to be with her. Let her follow you. I believe that with fellow Taoist Bai's ability, you can definitely arrange it properly. In that case, you can follow me from now on." Ziyue did not hesitate. He squatted down and picked up the little girl. The others naturally did not have any objections. Gong Fei and Lu Zhishuan of the Tao Accomplishment sect did not have any objections. As for Yu Yang and Ding Mao, Ziyue was going to join the Morning Sun sect anyway. If the little girl followed him, she would definitely be a member of the Morning Sun sect. They naturally agreed. Therefore, the matter was settled. Now that this matter is settled, we have to leave. Fellow Taoist Bai, the mountains will not change, and the rivers will flow forever. Goodbye. Zhao Ziyan lightly jumped onto the red-crowned crane and said to Ziyue, "Goodbye." Gu Hao also cupped his fists. Without waiting for Ziyue's reply, the red-crowned crane had already floated up and flew into the distance in a beautiful arc. I hope we can see fellow Taoist Bai in the Morning Sun sect. On the Purplewood Cosmic Shuttle, Yu Yang said, "Goodbye." Ziyue nodded and replied. Gong Fei looked deeply at Ziyue, but did not say anything. Soon, the flying shuttle rose into the sky and broke through the void. Soon it flew away. On the ground, almost all the people of Bitter Lotus Village knelt down and bowed. Immortal voices could be heard. Ziyue frowned slightly. For some reason, Gong Fei's gaze made him feel extremely uncomfortable. However, Gong Fei was still very friendly and did not do anything malicious. This made him feel extremely confused. As long as he doesn't provoke me, I don't have to care about him. After all, we might have to cross paths in the future. Ziyue thought to himself and did not take it to heart. He carried the little girl and jumped onto the black puppy's broad back. Oh, the black puppy seemed to know that there was a weak person sitting on its back. It deliberately slowed down and started running gently. This time, I didn't get much, but my spiritual energy has greatly improved. Ziyue could not help but feel happy. In terms of the distribution of the spoils, Ziyue did not get much. He remembered that the black puppy had swallowed a monster core fragment and obtained the treasure-stabilizing divine light. Therefore, he chose the monster core fragment of the cat demon that they had destroyed. Perhaps it was really possible for him to obtain another Dharma spell. If this monster core was intact, it would naturally be worth a lot. However, now that it had been destroyed, it had lost a lot of its spirituality. Therefore, its value had decreased greatly. Therefore, When he suggested it, the others agreed without much hesitation. As for spiritual energy, Ziyue looked at his attribute panel. Spiritual energy, 1454228. It increased by more than 500,000 points. He could not help but feel satisfied. This time, most of the increase in spiritual energy was obtained from killing the rats. Although the increase in spiritual energy was not much, when countless rats gathered together, the number was considerable. Naturally, his spiritual energy increased as well. Other than the increase in spiritual energy, the cultivation of the great immortal martial palm has also reached 97%. It is only 3% away from the beginner stage. I think I'll be able to break through in a few days. It had been more than a month since he had obtained this secret technique of the immortal martial sect. Now, he was finally going to reach the beginner stage. In his heart, he was looking forward to it. A day later, in the immortal pavilion of the Qingsheng County. What? You want to return to the sect? Why? Lu Zixuan looked at Gong Fei in shock. I naturally have my reasons for returning to the sect. Martial uncle, you don't have to ask. I have already asked for leave from Immortal Master Xiao He. He agreed to let me leave for 2 months. After I return, I will make up for my duties. Gong Fei packed his luggage and quickly walked out of the room. Is it because of that, Ziyue? Lu Zixuan asked. Gong Fei's footsteps paused for a moment before he opened his mouth and said, Do you know what our Dao Achieving Sect used to be? Our Dao Achieving Sect was established 270 years ago. Ancestor Jiang Lixing was a rogue cultivator. 270 years ago, after he broke through to the aperture opening realm, he officially established the sect. This is recorded in the inscriptions of the sect. Could there be something else? Lu Zixuan couldn't help but ask. This is actually a secret that only our headmaster's lineage knows about. Gong Fei paused for a moment before he continued. There is no harm in telling you. Ancestor Jiang Lixing was actually a disciple of the immortal martial sect, which was destroyed by the Wu country 300 years ago. He was also the son of the sect master. The cultivation method we mainly cultivate is called the Dao Achieving Art. It is actually the ultimate cultivation method of the immortal martial sect, the immortal martial achieving art. Immortal martial sect? Immortal martial achieving art. Lu Zixuan couldn't help but be taken aback. He then said in a low voice, That Ziyue came from the Wu country. Could it be that he is related to the immortal martial sect? 300 years ago, the immortal martial sect was a great sect whose cultivation method was comparable to the Kunwu sword sect. Compared to the Morning Sun sect, they were only slightly weaker. They had a total of 3 ultimate arts, namely the immortal martial achieving art, the immortal martial grand palm, and the immortal martial glazed light. They also had the ultimate treasure of the sect, the heavenly divination mirror. Chapter 276. The palm imprint that Ziyue used, Lu Zixuan exclaimed in shock. When he used it, although he concealed it and only used his internal energy, the core of the palm imprint is similar to our immortal martial arts. It should be the great immortal martial palm. Gong Fei said in a low voice. If it's true, we need to report this to the sect leader and ask that Ziyue to return this secret art to our Dao sect. Lu Zixuan nodded and said solemnly, Not only that, I suspect that the heavenly evolution mirror is also in his hands. Gong Fei shook his head and said, The great immortal martial palm is a secret art unique to the sect leader. In the immortal martial sect 300 years ago, those who were qualified to learn this secret art were all dead. Even our Dao realization sect's ancestral master didn't have the time to learn it, because he was young and weak. So, there are only 2 powers that possess this secret art. One is the royal clan of the Wu country that destroyed the immortal martial sect. The other is the sect leader of the immortal martial sect, Jiang Wu Dao. That Ziyue is obviously not from the royal clan of the Wu country. If not, he wouldn't have come all the way to Deqian to join the Quyang sect. In that case, the origin of the grand immortal martial palm that he cultivated was obvious without even asking. And the heavenly evolution mirror was in the hands of the sect leader of the immortal martial sect, Zhang Wu Dao. Hearing this, Lu Zixuan's heart trembled. He was very decisive and said, "Since this is the case, let's not delay any longer. I will go with you and rush to the sect. Let's try to stop that Ziyue before he joins the Choyang sect. It's too late. With our speed, we need at least 12 days to reach the sect. Even the sect leader would need 3 to 5 days to reach the Choyang sect," Gong Fei said with a solemn expression. "However, this is an important matter and we can't delay it. Let's go now." Sitting on the black puppy, the little girl was very obedient and quiet. Even though she was sitting on the little black dog, she was actually extremely happy. However, she still forcefully restrained herself and didn't make a single sound for fear of disturbing Ziyue. She was so obedient that it was a little pitiful. Ziyue knew in his heart that he would definitely spend the next period of time on the road. Ziyue was not a talkative person. In order not to let the little girl be too bored, he bought a set of books when he passed by a village. Every day, he would spend a certain amount of time teaching her how to read and write. In any case, it would come in handy sooner or later. In addition, in order to give her a better foundation, Ziyue would teach her the body's 8 extraordinary meridians and the various structures of the internal organs. He even taught her some spiritual materials, spiritual veins, magic tools, spiritual herbs, and other things related to the common knowledge of immortal magic cultivators. He wasn't a professional teacher and didn't have any experience in teaching people. He just said whatever came to his mind, and it was a little chaotic. What was rare was that the little girl was extremely smart and had an excellent memory. She learned very quickly and was very serious. Therefore, her progress was extremely fast. In just a week, she could read hundreds of words and memorize Ziyue's explanations. Of course, during this period, Ziyue spent most of his time cultivating by himself. He didn't know why, but there was a sense of urgency in his heart that made him feel like he couldn't stop walking. In addition, after such a long time, he had actually fallen in love with this seemingly monotonous way of cultivation that could actually strengthen himself. Simply speaking, he was already used to it. Therefore, whenever he had free time, he would immerse himself in cultivation. The 5-direction pure yuan technique, the Khanate 9 transformation technique, the great immortal martial handprint, the treasure stabilizing divine light. What was worth mentioning was that the cultivation of the 5-direction pure yuan technique had already reached 68% of the uninitiated level. He was another step closer to the initiated level. However, at this time, the cultivation of the 5-direction pure yuan technique had also started to slow down. Ziyue estimated that it would be a few days later than the time that he had originally planned before he would officially initiate the initiated level. As for the Khanate 9 transformation technique, the cultivation speed had increased to a certain extent. Although it was still extremely slow, he could see improvement. As for the cultivation progress, it was at 9% of the uninitiated level. As for the cultivation of the great immortal martial handprint, it was now at 99% of the uninitiated level. It was only one step away from the actual initiated level. This step was actually a small bottleneck, a small barrier. If it was fast, it could be broken through within a few hours. If it was slow, it might take 3 to 5 days. Regarding this, Ziyue's solution was extremely simple. He could only practice and perform it over and over again. It was also because of this that he spent relatively less effort on the treasure-stabilizing divine light. His current cultivation progress had just reached 20% of the uninitiated level. In fact, in his heart, he actually valued this magic very much. Although the treasure-stabilizing divine light wasn't an offensive or defensive magic, it could often play a miraculous role in critical moments. In the previous few battles, this magic had played an important role. He believed that once the treasure-stabilizing divine light was perfected, it would definitely be of great help to him. In addition to the above cultivation, Ziyue would also put his mind on the formation truth and the basic alchemy skills. In particular, he planned to study the basic alchemy skills well for a period of time. Otherwise, Wouldn't it be a waste of his spirit weapon-grade alchemy furnace and the acupoint enlightening pill formula? Of course, the main reason was that he knew that even if he really joined the Rising Sun sect and successfully obtained the bottleneck-breaking pill and the acupoint enlightening pill, the chances of him breaking through are not high. An immortal cultivation sect is definitely not a charity haul. The preciousness of the acupoint enlightening pill can be seen from the acupoint enlightening pill formula. Not to mention the materials, just the fact that the success rate can only be guaranteed by at least a second-grade intermediate or even a second-grade advanced alchemist is enough to prove that it is not something that ordinary cultivators can afford. This is the case even for the elites of the sections. Ziyue was far more mature than his actual age. He was calm and steady, and he did not take any chances. Instead of waiting for the rewards from the sects, it was better to try it himself. At least, based on the attributes panel, he believed that the speed at which he could advance to a second-grade intermediate or even a second-grade advanced alchemist would not be too slow. The Rising Sun sect was surrounded by mountains. The mountain gate was called the Rising Sun Peak, and it was a true third-grade spirit vein. On such a spirit vein, the spirit energy was abundant, and the cultivation speed was also very good. It could support many immortal cultivators. It was also a place that countless itinerant cultivators, martial artists, and even ordinary people yearned for. However, it was not easy to set foot in this place. This was because there was a natural barrier in front of the mountain gate, the remote Cloud Mountain Swamp. The remote Cloud Mountain Swamp was a huge piece of barren land. It stretched for hundreds of miles, and except for a few places where trees grew and the soil was more solid, the ground in most areas was extremely soft. From time to time, there would be muddy water flowing with different depths. If one was not careful, one would sink into it and sink into the depths of the swamp. In addition, this place was close to the mountain gate of the Rising Sun sect. Under the blessing of the third-grade spirit vein, the spirit energy was relatively rich, and many rare flowers, herbs, and spiritual materials grew there. As a result, demonic beasts were formed, and strange beasts were everywhere, running rampant. Because of this, there were countless itinerant cultivators, martial artists, and even ordinary people buried in the remote Cloud Mountain Swamp every year. Perhaps only the caravans that only set off once every month and were protected by many martial artists and even cultivators with immortal spells could reach the depths of the swamp of remote Cloud Mountain smoothly. They could reach the market of remote Cloud Mountain that was only 30 miles away from Cheyang sect. Unfortunately, when Ziyue arrived at the county town at the edge of the Cloud Mountain swamp, the caravan had already set out, and it would take at least half a month for them to return. However, this was not a big problem for Ziyue. After Ziyue inquired about some information about the remote Cloud Mountain swamp, he only rested there for one night. The next day, he set out with the little girl, Zhao Yu'er, and the little black dog. In the eyes of others, the Cloud Mountain swamp was dangerous, but in Ziyue's eyes, it was not. His powerful strength naturally gave him unparalleled confidence and courage. Spiritual energy plus 96, plus 8, plus 14. This swamp was really worthy of being called a land of death. Ziyue had just approached, but he could already feel that his spiritual energy was increasing. Even though the frequency was not fast and the amount of spiritual energy increased was not too much, every few minutes or sometimes even 10 breaths, he could feel that his spiritual energy had increased. In a short time, his spiritual energy had increased by more than 1,000 points. Survival of the fittest, natural selection. This is indeed not a good place. Ziyue stepped into the swamp and cast a spiritual light shield on Zhao Yu'er, who was sitting steadily on the little black dog. This spiritual light shield was mainly used to protect against the poisonous gas in the swamp. As for ordinary mutated beasts or even powerful demons, Ziyue would naturally deal with them. Although there were many poisonous insects and ferocious beasts in the Cloud Mountain swamp, after the Cheyang sects purge every 6 months, there were very few spiritual demons. Generally, if one's luck was not too bad, they would definitely not encounter them. Ziyue believed that his luck was not bad, so he was not worried. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A group of poisonous bees spread in the swamp. Any living thing that approached would not be able to escape their stings. Once they were bitten, ordinary people would not even be able to last 3 breaths before dying. Ziyue's expression did not change as he gently struck out with his palm. Boom! Under the huge palm, dozens of poisonous bees were directly smashed into meat paste. A poisonous scorpion was hiding in a bush. The moment Ziyue approached, it shot out. Similarly, a palm print came crashing down from above. The surging and majestic palm not only destroyed the poisonous scorpion, but also killed the nest of purple cloud insects under the ground. Along the way, regardless of what he encountered, Ziyue struck out with his palm. It was very simple and direct. There was almost no existence that could block his attack and not die. Just like that, an hour passed. When Ziyue struck out with his palm again, the void trembled. Buzz! The void trembled. Before the palm print could even land, a giant python had already died without a sound. When the palm landed, the ground caved in more than 10 meters deep. The body of a giant python was also turned into meat paste. Finally, I've reached the entry level of the immortal martial palm. Taking a deep breath, Ziyue's face revealed a trace of joy. Chapter 277. The elementary level Grand Immortal Martial Palm imprint is actually so much stronger compared to before. Ziyue glanced at the huge crater on the ground. Although the ground was soft and it was easy to sink into it, he was still incomparably shocked in his heart. But thinking about it, it's normal. This Grand Immortal Martial Palm imprint is the ultimate art of the Immortal Martial sect from 300 years ago. Naturally, it can't be compared to ordinary martial arts or immortal arts. Ziyue thought in his heart as he laughed, feeling that it was normal. At its peak, the Immortal Martial sect was comparable to the Kunwu Sword sect and was only slightly weaker than the Chaoyang sect. How could the ultimate art of the Immortal Martial sect be weak? This is only the elementary level, using inner energy to drive it. After reaching the minor completion stage, I will convert it into spiritual energy. Within the tyranny, there will be an additional layer of agility, allowing me to lift heavy objects as though they were light. And when the Grand Immortal Martial Palm imprint is cultivated to the major completion stage, the fusion of immortal and martial, the fusion of inner energy and spiritual energy, will be able to unleash the true might of this ultimate art. Back then, the Immortal Martial sect relied on this ultimate art to dominate for a period of time. Ziyue's heart was filled with anticipation, but he didn't impatiently use his spiritual energy to improve it. As his cultivation base increased, the grade of his martial arts and immortal arts would also increase. The time required to improve would also increase accordingly. He would also need a period of time to adapt. Although this period of time wasn't long, in order to avoid any accidents, he naturally had to find a safe place to cultivate. Big Brother is so awesome. The little girl, Zhao Yuer, stared at the crater on the ground with her eyes wide open. She was so shocked that her mouth was agape. After a long while, she closed her mouth and looked at Ziyue with a look of worship. If you work hard, you will also be able to do it in the future. Ziyue smiled and patted her head, after which he continued on his way. Spiritual energy plus 65, plus 166, plus 812, plus 137. In the boundless swamp, there would never be a lack of slaughter. Ziyue pushed his way through and killed countless people. But compared to the countless living creatures in the swamp, he was merely a drop in the ocean. The increase in spiritual energy in his body was mostly due to the various living creatures killing each other in the swamp. The increase in spiritual energy from his hands only accounted for 1/3 of it. 3 hours later, the ground started to harden. Trees started to grow tall and straight. Tall and straight. Perhaps it was due to the abundance of spiritual chi, but these trees seemed to be towering into the clouds. The leaves at the top of the trees. Even though it was already autumn, they didn't wither or turn yellow. Soon that mountain peak. To the peak to the peak to peak. Iziua looked into the distance. There was a tall and huge mountain peak that was covered by the continuous clouds. There was an immortal martial sect. To the immortal martial sect. To the immortal martial sect to the immortal martial immortal sect. Immortal mortal. Because of the route, Ziwe missed the market on Mount Yunwu and directly arrived at the mountain gate of the Chaoyang sect. At the foot of the mountain gate was a place that looked like a small town. The houses were arranged in picturesque disorder, forming a huge street. There was a lot of people coming and going. Here comes another one, and he has a family to feed. As soon as he stepped into the small town, he heard a laugh. Ziwe looked over and saw a bald man in his 30s. He didn't get angry. Instead, he asked calmly, "May I know how to get to the Dao Pavilion?" Long ago, he had heard about the rules of joining the Chaoyang sect from Yuyang and Dingmao. He knew that the Chaoyang sect didn't have high requirements in this aspect. Even if it was an itinerant cultivator, as long as he had the aptitude for immortal martial arts, he could directly register in the Dao Pavilion at the foot of the mountain. In 3 to 5 days at most, he could officially become a disciple of the Chaoyang sect. Of course, as a major sect of immortal martial arts, the Chaoyang sect had its own set of operating rules. Generally, they would evaluate the disciples based on their age, aptitude for immortal martial arts, or their realm in immortal martial arts, and adjust their treatment. If one's aptitude and potential were too low, many people would rather be an itinerant cultivator than stay in the Chaoyang sect and struggle bitterly. It would be more enjoyable. After all, many people couldn't break through the barrier and become an enlightened immortal master in their lifetime. Of course, for people like Ziwe who needed the bottleneck-breaking elixir and enlightening elixir to break through the realm, as well as the follow-up cultivation techniques to increase their realm, the only way was to join a sect. Sure enough, another one who came to join the Chaoyang sect. But are you prepared to stay in the Chaoyang sect for 30 years and be a servant? Also, the bald man's eyes slanted slightly and looked at Ziwe mockingly. He said, "It's not certain whether the Dao Pavilion will take a liking to you. Why do you say that?" Ziwe frowned slightly and asked, "You came all the way here from the remote Cloud Mountain and the swamp. You also said that you want to join the Dao Pavilion. Don't tell me that you are willing to give up your freedom and become a servant for the many martial arts resources and even the Khanate elixir." The bald man shook his head and continued. If it was 10 years ago, the Chaoyang sect would have reluctantly accepted martial artists who had the strength of the inner force realm. But 10 years ago, after it was revealed that the 7 Khanate ancestral masters of the 7 Sword Mountain were the servants of the Chaoyang sect, more and more martial artists came here regardless of the danger. In addition, in the Chaoyang sect, there are also many disciples who have families in the secular world. Without the aptitude for the immortal arts, they became servants for the sake of a future. Now, if your martial arts cultivation has not reached the second rate, you can't enter the immortal gate. As he said, he raised his head and looked at Ziwe again, his eyes full of pity. Although he could not see through Ziwe's martial arts cultivation, he could tell from his face that he was not strong, at least not at the level of a second-rate expert. As for Ziwe, the dog, and the little girl, he was not surprised that they could safely cross the swamp of the remote Cloud Mountain. Although the swamp was dangerous, after countless people had crossed it, there were already many relatively safe places that had been marked out. In addition, there were caravans that passed by every month to reach the market of the remote Cloud Mountain. The real distance to cross was only 30 miles. In fact, as long as one was careful enough and had the strength of the inner force realm and had a certain level of self-protection, one could naturally reach this place smoothly. "Oh, servant? But I didn't do it to become a servant." He frowned. Although he was also a cultivator of the immortal arts, he was an orthodox martial artist. Being called a servant made him feel uncomfortable. "Are you also a cultivator of the immortal arts?" When the bald man heard this, he could not help but say with disdain, "Is there a problem?" Ziwe glanced at him indifferently. With a point of his finger, An orange-red flame appeared in his hand. With a light shake, the flame disappeared. He did not stay any longer and stepped directly into the small town. This small town was not big. Even if the bald man was not big, he could find the Dowentering Pavilion with just a few steps. There was no need for him to deliberately ask around. Is he really a cultivator of the immortal arts? The bald man's eyes widened. His face suddenly flushed red, and he seemed somewhat ashamed. His original intention was to deliberately mention the rules of the Chaoyang sect and make Ziwei return disappointed, thus satisfying his gloating thoughts. He did not expect that the other party was not a martial artist at all, but a cultivator with the aptitude for the immortal arts. This made him feel somewhat resentful. Deep in his eyes, there was a strong sense of envy. Old Chow, are you defeated? Look at that person's white robe. He rushed all the way here without any damage or dirt. Can't you see that he's not ordinary? A middle-aged man dressed in long black sleeves, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth, said with a laugh. Who knew that he's dressed as a martial artist? But he's also an immortal arts cultivator. No, I have to go and see. The disciples of the Chaoyang sect are divided into 4 classes according to age, aptitude, and realm. The first class is the most respected, and the 4th class is the lowest. If he's in the 4th class, even if he joins, he'll only be a servant disciple. His status is not much higher than us martial slaves. I'd like to see what class he'll be divided into. With that, Old Chow also hurriedly followed, wanting to see for himself. In a small town, there were many martial artists like them who could not join the Chaoyang sect. They dreamed of becoming a Khanate ancestor like the 7 Khanate ancestors of the 7 Sword Mountain, and then they could travel the world with their swords. They had a lot of free time and liked to join in the fun. Soon, a group of people followed. The Dowentering Pavilion. Ziwei only walked for a few minutes and found the Dowentering Pavilion. Without hesitation, he put the black puppy aside, then took Zhao Yu's hand and stepped directly in. You want to join our Chaoyang sect? After entering the Dowentering Pavilion, a gray-haired old man looked up at Ziwei and said casually, How's your cultivation? The 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. Ziwei said in a deep voice. The old man suddenly looked up and said in shock, You're not a martial artist? I'm used to restraining my aura. Only then did Ziwei realize why the bald man had determined that he was a martial artist. He was indeed dressed like a martial artist. He hurriedly released the aura on his body. Suddenly, a light aura that belonged to an immortal arts cultivator flowed out from his body. You're really at the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. The old man breathed a sigh of relief and quickly stood up. He immediately became much more enthusiastic. He even called a young cultivator beside him to serve him hot tea and invited him to take a seat. At the door, Old Chow and the others who were peeping opened their eyes wide in shock. The 9th level of the Qi refinement realm? Even though they had long known that Ziwei was an immortal arts cultivator, they never expected that his cultivation would be so high. The 9th level of the Qi refinement realm was an elite disciple in the Chaoyang sect. His status in the Chaoyang sect was higher than that of the veteran handyman who had broken through to the Khanate realm. As for being a Wu slave, it was actually a self-deprecation. Chapter 278. Welcome, fellow cultivator, to our Chaoyang sect. However, when we enter the Dao Pavilion, we still need to test you, such as your age, aptitude for immortal arts, skills, and so on. Finally, we'll divide you into 4 levels to deal with your future treatment. Of course, you've already reached the 9th level of the Qi refinement realm. You don't need to be tested to be in the 2nd level. I'm just doing my job. The old man smiled and said, No problem. Ziwei nodded and did not refuse. Then, he held the little girl Zhao Yu's hand and said, Besides me, she also wants to join the Chaoyang sect. So, let's test them together. Of course, there's a Qi testing platform in our backyard. Through the Qi testing platform, we can test your aptitude for immortal arts. In this way, you can also understand your own characteristics, better choose your own cultivation method, and practice the corresponding magic and cultivation method. As the old man spoke, he hurriedly led Bai Ziyue to the backyard. In the front yard, old Chow and the others were itching, but they did not dare to barge into the Dao Pavilion. They could only wait patiently at the door. Along the way, Bai Ziyue and the old man introduced themselves to each other and chatted. One was curious about the Choyang sect and wanted to integrate into it as soon as possible. The other was a natural chatterbox. Plus, he was very optimistic about Ziyue's potential, so he knew everything. Thus, Ziyue learned that the old man was the steward of this place. His name was Li Quan, and he was at the 8th level of the Qi refinement realm. Because he knew his potential was limited, he took this idle position to earn karma points and enjoy leisure. As for karma points, it was a reward and punishment system of the Chaiyang sect. In fact, it was similar to the contribution mechanism of Ziyue in the Scorching Sun Gang. However, compared to the contribution of the Scorching Sun Gang, the karma points of the Chaiyang sect were more extensive and more comprehensive. The entire Chaiyang sect was related to karma points in all aspects. Not only immortal arts cultivators, but even martial artists and handymen who wanted to exchange for martial arts manuals and breakthrough elixirs needed karma points. If I want to exchange for bottleneck-breaking elixirs and orifices enlightening elixirs, can I also rely on karma points? How can I get karma points? Ziyue asked curiously. Of course. The price of bottleneck-breaking pill in the Internal Affairs Hall was 10,000 karma points. The enlightening elixir, on the other hand, cost 30,000 karma points. However, these two spirit pills are very rare. Fellow Taoist is not the only one who wants them. Thus, they are often priceless. In our Chaoyang Dao sect, we refine a batch every 3 years, but there was once a 9th-layer Qi condensation cultivator who didn't apply for it for 9 years. Li Quan naturally knew what Ziyue was thinking. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to break through to the enlightenment stage, he wouldn't have rashly joined the Chaiyang sect with his 9th level of the Qi refining stage. As for the acquisition of karma points, that's simple. Just take a position and do some corresponding missions. Or they could directly use spirit stones, dharma artifacts, spiritual materials, and other resources that were useful for immortal arts to exchange for. Generally speaking, 1 karma point is equivalent to 1 low-grade spiritual stone. Li Quan thought for a while and said, the bottleneck-breaking pill costs 10,000 karma points, and the enlightening elixir costs 30,000 karma points, which is equivalent to 40,000 low-grade spiritual stones. Ziyue nodded silently, knowing that the price was not unaffordable. At least, after becoming a disciple of the Chaoyang Dao sect, he could exchange for karma points. For example, the old rogue cultivator Elder Wu didn't even have the opportunity to exchange for karma points. When breaking through, one careless move could lead to death. Along the way, he had gained more than 10,000 karma points, which was enough to exchange for a bottleneck-breaking pill. The real difficulty was that there was no market for it. The 9th layer of the Qi refining stage was a barrier. The Chaoyang Dao sect was a large sect of immortal arts, with 3,000 cultivators of immortal arts. There were bound to be many people stuck in this realm. Of course, many people couldn't afford the enlightening elixir, but there were still some who could afford the bottleneck-breaking pill. The competition was fierce. It seems that I really have to refine the enlightening elixir myself. Bai Ziyue frowned. He knew that this might be the most appropriate method. Not to mention that he couldn't afford the enlightening elixir. Even if he could, he might not be able to compete with other immortal arts cultivators of the same realm, as he had just joined the Chaoyang Dao sect. This is the Qi testing platform. Every time it's activated, it costs 5 low-grade spiritual stones. For now, you'll have to pay for it yourself. As Li Quan spoke, he pointed to a 5-meter square platform not far away from them. Ziyue nodded and looked at the Qi testing platform. Forbidding auras flickered on the spacious platform. With a rough count, there were more than 100 of them. It was obvious that this Qi testing platform was like Yu Yang's purple Wood Cosmos shuttle. It wasn't a spiritual weapon, but it wasn't any less expensive than a spiritual weapon. The aura of the arrayed Dao was naturally compatible with the entire platform, and one could feel it even from the outside. Without hesitation, Zue threw out 10 spiritual stones and jumped on a platform. Fellow Taoist Bai, I'm going to activate it. Li Quan reminded him, and 5 spiritual stones were embedded in the corresponding positions. With a surge of spiritual qi, they were activated. Buzz, buzz, buzz. One after another, the aura of the arrayed Tao was activated, and they were compatible with the restrictions on the qi testing platform. Like a rainbow descending from the sky, a dazzling light flashed. Zue sensed that the light wasn't threatening, and his tense heart relaxed slightly. The light fell directly on his body. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Then, on the platform, 3 lights of different colors appeared in the void. Fellow Taoist, it seems that you have 3 spiritual roots. If you cultivate techniques of the water, fire, and wood attributes, your speed will be relatively faster. Li Quan was actually a little surprised. This talent wasn't bad, but it wasn't very strong either. With Ziyue's age, he had already cultivated to the 9th level of the qi refining stage, which went against the rules of cultivation. However, such things weren't absolute. Opportunities, fortunes, and miraculous encounters could often break such restrictions. He naturally wouldn't ask about it rashly and arouse suspicion for no reason. Water, fire, and wood. Ziyue nodded. Compared to the smoothness of his cultivation of the corresponding techniques, he wasn't too surprised. He knew that he wasn't the kind of person who had outstanding talent. Whether it was martial arts or immortal techniques, it was the same. The reason why he could have such achievements was mostly because of the attribute panel. Of course, having 3 spiritual roots didn't mean that he could only cultivate the corresponding techniques. This talent only meant that when he cultivated the techniques of these 3 attributes, his progress would be faster. Yu go up and take the test. Then, Ziyue looked at Zhao Yu. Yes, big brother. The little girl nodded obediently and climbed up the platform. Li Quan once again inserted the spiritual stones and began to activate. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A dazzling spiritual light flashed again. Then, everyone saw a golden light shoot out from Zhao Yu's body. Moreover, at the same time, a rich purple color spread around her body. In a trance, she looked incomparably noble, as if she was born with a noble stomach. It made people feel a sense of submission. Li Quan gasped. He was extremely shocked and said, a metal attribute celestial spiritual root and an innate Taoist aptitude. As if frightened by Li Quan's expression, Zhao Yu hurriedly jumped off the platform as soon as the test was over. She hid beside Ziyue with a timid look on her face. However, at this moment, Li Quan clearly valued his daughter more than by Ziyue. He looked at her with a fervent expression and was so excited that he was trembling. Superior grade talent, super grade talent, he murmured. After a while, he calmed down and said with a solemn face, Fellow cultivator Bai, your sister's talent is frighteningly good. She has already surpassed our evaluation standards and reached the super grade. I have to inform the sect immediately and ask them to deal with it. Please forgive me. As he spoke, he did not have any scruples about Ziyue. He took out a voice transmission disc and reported all the news to the person on the other side. It was an innate Taoist aptitude. After the other party finished transmitting the message, Ziyue asked, An innate Taoist aptitude is a kind of talent. If it is said that 1 in 10,000 people have the aptitude for immortal spells, then 1 in 10,000 people have an innate Taoist aptitude. This kind of talent is even rarer than a celestial spiritual root. This is because once it is awakened, it will form a remarkable ability. A natal remarkable ability. It is a terrifying method that transcends magic and is enough to kill immortals. Li Quan took a deep breath and explained. Ziyue's heart skipped a beat, and he was also surprised. In fact, he had a hunch that the little girl's talent was not bad. This was because he had sensed an aura from her body that was similar to Fan Xingyu's, who had a special physique. Now that he thought about it, it was the unique aura of a Taoist aptitude. This aura was so special that it made the cat demon, who was about to become a psychic demon, want to get close in advance and devour it. He had also overestimated her talent as much as possible. However, he did not expect her talent to be so powerful. A celestial spiritual root of the metal element was already very rare and was considered a super-grade talent. An innate Taoist aptitude could even awaken remarkable abilities. Although he had not come into contact with the terrifying nature of remarkable abilities and had rarely heard of them, he could judge from the sporadic records that it was powerful. Terrifying. Ziyue suddenly thought of Fan Qingyu. Now that he thought about it, she had already reached the immortal spell enlightenment at such a young age. There was no doubt that she also had a celestial spiritual root. Coupled with her special physique, it was obvious that she also had an innate Taoist aptitude. Shaking his head, Ziyue gradually calmed down. Of course, he was envious. However, he had his own unique capital. After thinking about it carefully, it seemed that there was no need to be envious. This was because he was confident that he would also be able to master remarkable abilities in the future. Chapter 279. A few minutes later, a few figures approached the place from afar and entered the backyard of the Dao entrance pavilion without any hesitation. Immortal Master Zhang Zhaohua from the Internal Affairs Hall of the Chaoyang sect. Immortal Master Ma Chengfu from the Hall of Inheritance. Immortal Master Zhu Shuaizhen. What exactly happened in here? Outside the Dao pavilion, Old Chao and the rest stared in shock at the figure that flashed past. All of them were shocked. First-class talent? Could that person be a first-class talent? I guess it's not just first-class talent. I remember that the last time someone was tested as a first-class talent, only Immortal Master Zhang Xiaohua from the Internal Affairs Hall appeared. This time, there are 3 Immortal Masters who have enlightened their apertures. They were guessing the situation inside. Supervisor Zhang, Immortal Master Ma, Immortal Master Zhu. Seeing the 3 figures flying down from the courtyard, Li Quan's expression changed. He hurriedly walked forward and greeted them with a respectful expression. Greetings, Immortal Masters. Bai Ziyue was also shocked as he cupped his hands and said, Immortal Masters who had enlightened their apertures could use spirit treasures and fly in the sky. Even if they had to rely on external forces, it still made him envious. In contrast, Khanate martial artists were far from being able to do that. They were said to be in the same realm as Immortal Masters who had enlightened their apertures, but in fact, the gap between them had begun to widen. In the cultivation world, there were very few Khanate martial artists who could defeat Immortal Masters who had enlightened their apertures. Is this the super talented person you mentioned, who has a metal attribute, celestial spirit root, and an innate Taoist aptitude? They ignored Li Quan and nodded at Ziyue before looking at their daughter, Xiaoyu. Seeing that Li Quan nodded, they did not hesitate and soon began the test again. When the golden light and the purple aura that represented innate nobility rose from Zhao Yu's body, everyone's eyes immediately became fiery. Zhao Yu, I wonder if you're willing to be my disciple. Ma Chengfu looked at Zhao Yu with a smile on his face, looking quite kind. Come to me. I will teach you how to cultivate immortality. Zhu Shuaizhen, who was at the side, did not want to be outdone and said kindly. Zhao Yu had a timid look on her face as she hid beside Bai Ziyue and held his hand tightly. Big sister? He's already over 100 years old. Ma Chengfu, who was standing to the side, looked at Ziyue and said, Fellow Taoist Bai, your sister's talent is indeed excellent. However, no matter how talented one was, without the guidance of a good teacher, it was very easy for one to make mistakes, take many detours, and waste one's time. Most importantly, it was very easy to die prematurely. Many people were unwilling to see a genius grow up. I think you should understand what I mean. Therefore, I feel that it is very necessary to find a master for your younger sister. And I was the best choice. My family's patriarch is the second elder of the Chaoyang sect, Ma Daoquan. He's at the peak of the enlightening realm. He's enough to protect her until she grows up. I'm still in the late stage of the aperture awakening realm. I'm much stronger than you. As for protection, I think with my Zhu Shuaxian's strength, who would dare to have designs on my disciple? Zhu Shuaxian snorted coldly and said. Zhang Xiaohua of the Internal Affairs Hall smiled at the side and did not say anything. No matter who Zhao Yu'er acknowledged as her master in the end, he had already done them a favor. Big brother, don't you want me anymore? The little girl, Zhao Yu'er, seemed to have sensed something. She looked up at Bai Jiyue and sobbed. How could that be? Bai Jiyue was slightly stunned. He did not expect her to be so dependent on him. He could not help but change his mind. He turned to look at Ma Chengfu and the others and said, whether she wants to acknowledge a master and who she wants to acknowledge as her master, all of these still depend on her own wishes. If she's not willing, I won't force her. He had the confidence to say this. Just as Ma Chengfu said, after acknowledging a master, there would be fewer detours. If he did not have the attribute panel and could directly increase his cultivation would not have been so smooth. However, he could also be a good teacher and guide her. In terms of understanding of the purple Qi divine observation method, he reckoned that even the leader of the Chaiyang sect did not understand it as well as he did. As for protection, he was not afraid of those below the aperture enlightening state. He believed that he would not be helpless against those above the aperture enlightening state and would be able to protect Zhao Yu'er. Fellow Taoist Bai, I think you'd better think it through. With your mystical art realm at the 9th level of the Qi refining state, you must have already begun to consider the problem of breaking through to the aperture enlightening state. The bottleneck breaking elixir and the aperture enlightening elixir together require 40,000 karma points. Unless you suddenly have an epiphany and vaguely sense the location of the apertures of heaven and earth, if you want to break through, you can only succeed by exchanging these two elixirs. 40,000 karma points. Even if a cultivator at the 9th level of the Qi refining state tried his best to save 40,000 karma points, it would still take 10 years. If another burden was added to the equation, the time needed would be even longer. Disciples with celestial spiritual roots need relatively fewer resources to cultivate. However, the cultivation of mystical art is not only about cultivation, but also about celestial weapons. Cultivation of spells and mastering 1 or 2 mystical art skills. In 10 years, it would require at least 20,000 karma points. Not to mention, even if you have enough karma points, you may not be able to exchange these two elixirs. The bottleneck breaking elixir is refined once every 3 years, and the aperture enlightening elixir takes 5 years. With your experience, you will need to wait at least 3 or 5 rounds, which is 9 to 15 years, before you can exchange these two elixirs. In this way, you will need at least 20 years to break through to the aperture enlightening state. As he spoke, he paused slightly, as if waiting for Ziyue to digest the meaning of his words. Then he continued, however, if your sister is willing to be my disciple, although I will not directly give you 40,000 karma points, I can at least help you a little. At least, I can reduce the time you need to accumulate karma points by half. I can also rely on the power of the Ma family to cut the queue for you and exchange the bottleneck breaking elixir and the aperture enlightening elixir in advance. That is to say, you only need 10 years at most to break through to the aperture enlightening state. This is of great benefit to you, to me, and to Zhao Yu'er. In addition, it is worth mentioning that once Zhao Yu'er becomes my disciple, I will naturally provide her cultivation resources. You don't have to worry about it. It was precisely because he saw through some of Ziyue's thoughts that he analyzed carefully, hoping to dispel his thoughts indirectly. Senior Brother Ma's words are very reasonable. Although I look good on the surface, when I broke through from the 9th level of the Qi refining state to the aperture enlightening state, it took a full 15 years of preparation before I really exchanged the two elixirs. This was also because I grew up in the Chaiyang sect, and my father accumulated 5,000 karma points for me. The hardships involved are still vivid in my mind. Zhang Xiaohua, who was beside him, also tried to persuade him. Big sister, then can you help my brother exchange for those two elixirs within 10 years? At this moment, The little girl Zhao Yue suddenly walked in front of Zhu Shuaizhen and asked seriously with a straight face. Of course I can. Not only that, I can also lend him 10,000 karma points, which will save him a year or two of accumulating karma points. Zhu Shuaizhen was slightly stunned, but she quickly reacted and said hurriedly, "Well, I will worship you as my master." Zhao Yu said seriously with a straight face, "Why? If it's 10,000 karma points, I can also lend him." Ma Qingfu was shocked and asked incomprehensibly, "Because you threatened my brother," Zhao Yuer said with a serious face. "You are really—" Ma Qingfu opened his mouth and his face immediately darkened. He glanced at Zhu Shuaizhen and said, "Goodbye." With that, a small sword rushed out of his body and landed at his feet. With a light leap, it quickly soared into the sky and disappeared. Why do you have to do this? Although the enlightenment is difficult, I am not helpless. It won't take so long at all. Why should I sacrifice you? Zhua touched Zhao Yuer's head, then looked at Zhu Shuaizhen and said, "Immortal Master Zhu, I'm sorry, my sister may not be able to worship you as her master. I don't want her future to become a transaction. But this is the best choice for her, isn't it? As for the transaction, I think you don't have to think so. If Zhao Yuer becomes my disciple, you and I will become relatives. A little help is just a kind of favor. Why are you so rigid? Not to mention, this is Zhao Yuer's own choice." Zhu Shuaizhen frowned and said, "I didn't think it through." Zia narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then he looked at Zhao Yuer and asked, "I'll ask you one last time. Are you really willing to worship Immortal Master Zhu as your master?" "Yes." Zhao Yuer looked at Ziyue reluctantly and said, "Haha, everyone is happy. Just as well, I'll help you create a book today and distribute the tokens to officially become disciples of the Chaiyang sect." Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua laughed and quickly took out a flying shuttle-like Dharma artifact. With a light tap, the flying shuttle expanded with the wind and instantly expanded. "Come on up. I'll bring you up the mountain." Seeing this, Bai Ziyue did not hesitate. He pulled Zhao Yuer and jumped up. Because he had seen Yu Yang's purple wood Cosmos shuttle, he was not too surprised by this flying shuttle. Zhu Shuaizhen pondered for a moment and also stepped up. She said with a smile, "Today, I'll have to trouble you to bring me up the mountain." "Immortal Master Zhu, what are the two apertures of heaven and earth that Immortal Master Ma mentioned before?" After a moment of silence, Bai Ziyue could not help but ask. He was extremely curious about the two apertures of heaven and earth that Ma Qingfu had just mentioned. Instinctively, he felt that this was definitely the key to breaking through to the enlightenment realm. It seems that fellow Taoist Bai is really an itinerant cultivator and has no predecessors to guide you. That's why you have doubts about this. Zhu Shuaizhen said with a sigh. Then she continued, "Enlightenment, enlightenment. What you need to open are the two apertures of heaven and earth. Regardless of whether it's the barrier-breaking pill or the aperture awakening pill, it's actually to let the cultivator sense these two apertures and break through the barrier to break through the realm." Chapter 280. The heaven and earth acupoints run through heaven and earth and have no fixed location. Although they are in the body of a cultivator, the exact location is different for everyone. Even if one's cultivation level is as high as the sect leaders, it would be difficult for him to help others open these two acupoints. In fact, whether it is the bottleneck breaking pill or the aperture awakening pill, they only increase the success rate of a cultivator sensing these two acupoints. It does not guarantee success. He had to rely on himself to comprehend and feel everything. If you can directly sense these two acupoints with your own ability, you will naturally be able to clear the barrier between the Qi refinement realm and the aperture awakening realm. At that time, even if you don't use any spirit pills, you will naturally break through and become an aperture awakening realm cultivator. Zhu Shuaizhen said again, "Thank you, Master Immortal Zhu." Bai Ziyue came to a sudden realization and hurriedly thanked him sincerely. Doggy forgot." At this moment, Zhao Yuer looked at Ziyue and said, "Little Black, Ziyue was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly shouted, "Awo!" An excited roar sounded, and then the little black dog turned into a black shadow and rushed over quickly and jumped onto the flying shuttle. Zhang Xiaohua did not care too much about this and said, "Rise." The flying shuttle immediately rose. After it reached a height of several dozen feet, it immediately flashed with spiritual light and flew towards the mountain gate of the Chuyang sect. What's going on inside? At the gate, Old Chow and the others were pacing back and forth. They really wanted to know what was going on inside and why 3 Master Immortals had descended one after another. Look, that's Master Immortal Zhang's flying shuttle. Suddenly, a cry of surprise sounded. Master Immortal Zhu is also on the flying shuttle, and that person, that girl, and that dog. Who is he? Why did Master Immortal Zhang personally drive the flying shuttle to the mountain gate of the Chuyang sect? Could he be a descendant of some senior? Can it be that he's gifted and reached the 1st grade? Steward Li is coming out. They were discussing with each other. The moment they saw Li Quan walking out slowly, everyone fell silent, and then their gazes fell on Old Chow at the same time. His curiosity was the strongest. If others didn't ask, he would definitely not be able to hold it in. Sure enough, after a slight hesitation, Old Chow quickly gathered his courage and walked up. He licked his lips and asked with a smile, "That Steward Li, what was the rank of that person's test? No matter what rank it is, what does it have to do with you? Aren't I just curious?" Old Chow rubbed his big bald head and said with a smile, "Even Immortal Master Zhang from the Internal Affairs Division has come personally. What do you think?" Li Quan raised his eyes and said, "As for the matter regarding Zhao Yuer, he naturally didn't dare to easily reveal it." First class, Old Chow's eyes immediately widened. When he saw Steward Li's mysterious smile, he became even more convinced. Earlier, he had vaguely heard that person admit that he was in the 9th layer of the Qi refining stage. Moreover, from his appearance, the other party must be quite young. If not for his amazing talent, how could he achieve this? The other people who approached were all stunned at the same time, and their faces all revealed expressions of surprise and envy. For them, just having the aptitude for immortal cultivation was enough to make them envious. With this, he could directly join the Chuyang sect and become a formal disciple. Whether it was cultivating immortal cultivation or martial arts, it was much more convenient than them. First-class aptitude was something that they didn't even dare to think about. The flying shuttle cut through the sky and soon approached the Chuyang sect. As the shuttle approached, the endless fog gradually thinned out. A layer of array, Dao aura rippled slightly, and then after sensing the identity token on Zhang Xiaohua's body, it immediately opened a hole and let the flying shuttle step into it. This is our Chuyang sect's Mountain Protection Array, the Earth Extreme Magnetic Divine Light Array. It is a solid 3rd-grade array, not to mention an enlightened immortal. Even immortal Shunming Mirror wouldn't dare to be presumptuous here, Zhang Xiaohua explained, and the speed of the flying shuttle couldn't help but slow down. A huge mountain rose straight up into the clouds. Palaces, tall towers, steep peaks, flying cranes, and the abundant spirit Qi combined to form an immortal atmosphere. Ziyue's heart was surging, and he couldn't help but feel that it was an eye-opener. Soon, the flying shuttle landed in front of a huge palace. Countless disciples of the Chuyang sect came and went, and there were also martial arts practitioners who didn't have any immortal cultivation aura walking slightly in a low-key manner. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua and Zhu Shuaizhen, they all greeted them in a low voice. Registration, issuance of identity tokens, and finally allocation of residences. After a series of procedures, that night, Ziyue stayed on a mountain called Sunset Peak, which was 20 miles away from the main peak of the Chuyang sect. Although it was a bit remote, it was still within the range of the Earth Extreme Magnetic Divine Light Array. The overall spirit Qi was still abundant. After all, it was close to the 3rd-grade spirit vein, Sunset Peak, and the spirit Qi was far more abundant than the Dongxian market he had stayed in before. It was comparable to the spirit Qi of a 1st-grade spirit vein. In the Sunset Peak, there were also many cave residences opened by predecessors. Because of Zhang Xiaohua's special goodwill, Ziyue chose the cave residence that was not only spacious and comfortable, but there were also 3 acres of spirit fields not far from the cave residence, which could now be considered his property. The cave residence came with a second-grade Golden Light Mountain Protection Array, a first-grade Spirit Locking Array, and a first-grade Warning Array. They were all relatively practical arrays. Around the 3 acres of spirit fields, there was also a Spring Thunder Rain Array, which could make the spirit materials planted in the spirit fields grow better. No one had taken care of it for decades, so the 3 acres of spirit fields had naturally been abandoned. There were only vigorous weeds that were more than 2 meters tall spreading. Ziyue didn't pay too much attention to these. Zhao Yu had already left with her master, Zhu Shuaizhen. After he sent Zhang Xiaohua away, he directly entered the cave residence. The little black dog blindly followed beside him and very quickly found a comfortable place to lie down. This kind of place with abundant spirit qi was more beneficial to it, and its face was full of joy. Bai Ziyue looked around the cave abode and felt even more satisfied. The previous owner of this cave residence was obviously very particular. Not only did he open up a quiet room for cultivation, but he also divided it into an alchemy room, a weapon refining room, and a miscellaneous room. He didn't need to deliberately open it up again. After nearly 2 months of running around, I finally came to the Morning Sun sect and officially settled down. Ziyue came to the quiet room for cultivation, took a deep breath, and finally felt relaxed. Along the way, he had crossed thousands of miles and more than half of the territory of 2 countries. He had also encountered several dangers. Thinking about it, it was still vivid in his mind and made him feel emotional. I'm not in a hurry to learn the next cultivation method of the purple qi visualization technique. What's really bothering me now is actually the bottleneck between the qi refinement realm and the aperture awakening realm. The cultivation of the 5 elements pure vitality technique had already reached 97% of the uninitiated level. It was estimated that after a while, he would be able to officially enter the beginner level. As for the bottleneck breaking elixir and the aperture enlightening elixir, although he had some understanding, but not to mention the difficulty of exchange, the karma points needed to exchange for these 2 elixirs were not a small number. It seems that my previous concerns were not wrong. Compared to accumulating karma points to exchange, it would be better to rely on myself to learn the art of alchemy, collect materials, and refine the aperture enlightening elixir. Ziyue pondered silently, and soon came to a decision. The sudden epiphany and the vague feeling of the aperture of heaven and earth made him yearn for it, but he knew that it would be illusory. Many people would not have such an opportunity in their lifetime, and he did not think that he would have it. Moreover, even if he had it, when? 1 year later, 10 years later, or 100 years later? He could not afford to wait, so he decided to be down to earth. However, even if he was down to earth, as Ma Chengfu said, to complete tasks step by step and accumulate karma points, it was not his choice. According to Ma Chengfu, 10 years was too long for him, and he could not afford to waste time. So from the beginning, he had planned to walk the path of alchemy, not only because he already had the formula of the aperture enlightening elixir, but also because he believed that with the property panel, he would be able to raise his alchemist level in a short time. It should be noted that an alchemist could earn karma points much faster than an ordinary cultivator of immortal arts. Thinking of this, he immediately looked at the property panel. Name: New Martial Arts Realm. Early stage of the innate realm immortal arts realm. Perfection of Qi realm level 9 martial arts. Invincible golden body skill. 9 turns innate skill. Uninitiated 23%. Martial arts techniques. Perfection of God vanquishing saber technique. Beginner of immortal martial handprint 1%. Immortal arts. Level 9 of purple Qi visualization skill. Uninitiated of Wufang pure yuan skill 97%. Uninitiated of immortal martial true body 0%. Techniques. Perfection of talisman technique magic. Perfection of icy flame technique magic instinct. Perfection of frightening divine spike. Perfection of thunderfall. Perfection of Chaoyang swordsmanship. Perfection of 100 wave-treading technique. Uninitiated of treasure-stabilizing divine light. 36%. Spiritual energy. 1715123 inch. My spiritual energy has reached 171 million points. Compared to before, it has increased by almost 300,000 points. Ziyue's eyes lit up. The rewards from the trip to the swamp of remote Cloud Mountain were much greater than he had imagined. Although not all of the 300,000 points were obtained from the swamp, the feeling of having his soul power increase every moment he stayed in the swamp made him feel very comfortable. However, the most important thing is that I've finally reached the basic level of the great immortal martial palm. Since I have enough spiritual energy, I can raise it to perfection. Ziyue actually valued this secret art of the immortal martial sect very much and had been diligently practicing it. Being able to reach the basic level was not without his sweat and sweat. Spending 3485215 points of spiritual energy to raise the great immortal martial palm to perfection. So much. Ziyue couldn't help but stare. This amount of spiritual energy was indeed somewhat out of his expectations. But thinking about it, the great immortal martial palm was the secret art of the immortal martial sect. Just reaching the basic level was already extremely terrifying. It made sense that it would require so much spiritual energy. Although he thought so, his face still revealed a pained expression. He gritted his teeth and said, "Raise it." Chapter 281. Upgrade. As soon as he finished speaking, buzz. The void was distorted, and endless spiritual light was extracted in a short period of time and poured into Ziyue's body. In an instant, he felt his mind go blank, and waves of white mist rose from his head. This was because his brain was operating at a high speed in a short period of time and received too much information. Various experiences related to the cultivation of the grand immortal martial palm, the inspiration that came from it, and the memories that seemed to have formed after millions of times of cultivation flashed through his mind one by one. Furthermore, they were combined and refined and were optimized. In a trance, a brand new and majestic great immortal martial handprint that had completely transcended the original immaturity and became incomparably powerful appeared in his mind. Moreover, it seemed to belong to him from birth and was deeply imprinted in his mind. Moreover, in that instant, it was as if he had really experienced tens or hundreds of years of continuous cultivation, and he had cultivated the great immortal martial palm to the highest level. Great immortal martial handprint, perfection. An aura different from before was emitted from Ziyue's body. This aura was vigorous, powerful, mysterious, profound, and dangerous. Anyone who saw it would feel as if their mind would be suppressed, and they would not dare to think too much. A sense of reverence emerged in their hearts. After a long while, Ziyue gradually adapted to this aura, absorbed it into his body, and slowly retracted it. The perfection level of the great immortal martial handprint. Ziyue took a deep breath, and a trace of amazement flashed in his eyes. With my strength, I can't completely exert the full power of this martial technique. But even so, with my current strength, I can erupt with a terrifying power when I use it. It's absolutely easy to kill that Xiantian expert, Huang He, with one slap. Even if it's a warrior who has reached the middle or late Xiantian realm, very few people can resist it. Ziyue had not encountered a battle with an enlightened immortal master, so it was not easy for him to make a judgment. However, if he were to only consider martial artists, then with his current strength, the great immortal martial handprint could already crush most of the Xiantian realm experts. Most importantly, due to my deep understanding of this martial skill, I was able to comprehend some of the mysteries of the immortal martial true body in advance. Now, I'm able to combine it with innate true energy and spiritual energy to cultivate. A glint flashed across his eyes. When by Ziyue saw that the cultivation progress of the immortal martial true body was no longer 0%, which had remained unchanged for 10,000 years, but 1%, he was elated. The immortal martial true body was a body-tempering technique that used the true chi of a Shinto martial artist and the origin energy of an enlightened immortal master. Although this wasn't the ultimate art of the immortal martial sect, its might and effect weren't any weaker than the grand immortal palm. Once the characteristics of the immortal martial true body were used to execute the grand immortal martial handprint, the two would complement each other, and the power of the technique would be even more terrifying. In a daze, Ziwa suddenly thought of a beast skin book that he had seen in his free time. With a thought, his spiritual energy surged, and a beast skin book named Immortal Martial Secret Record appeared in his hands. This book was the only intact book he had found in the Immortal Martial Treasure Vault back then. The records on it had caused his mind to waver at that time. As expected, it's right. According to the Immortal Martial Secret Record, the 7th-generation sect leader of the Immortal Martial Sect was extremely talented and created the Immortal Martial True Body. He once said that with the Immortal Martial Tao as the foundation and the Immortal Martial True Body as the skeleton, the Grand Immortal Martial Handprint could be used to break through the limits of the Immortal Martial Realm. It was comparable to a divine ability and could kill immortals. Ziwa once again skimmed through the records in the book and was even more certain of this point. It's just that although I have the Immortal Martial True Body and the Grand Immortal Martial Handprint, I don't have the Immortal Martial Tao. It would be difficult for me to unleash the power recorded in the book. Ziwa frowned slightly. Divine ability, when combined, it would be a powerful technique comparable to a divine ability. In the end, because he lacked the most crucial Immortal Martial Tao, he couldn't form it. This made him feel somewhat disappointed. As for the Immortal Martial Glazed Light, which could also be comparable to a divine ability, he didn't have any thoughts about it. Because he lacked the Immortal Martial Tao and the Immortal Martial Glazed Light, it was naturally impossible for him to form it. He spent the entire night in cultivation. Early the next morning, Ziwa walked out of his cave and looked at the 3 mu of abandoned spiritual fields in front of his cave. Every official disciple of the Choyang sect can issue missions in the Internal Affairs Pavilion. Naturally, they can also directly hire handymen to open up the wasteland and take care of the spiritual fields. If he planted crescent moon rice, black corn, and other spirit rice in these 3 mu of spirit fields, he would be able to harvest 900 kilograms of spirit rice every year, which would be 300 kilograms per mu. 1 kg of spiritual rice could also be valued at 1 spiritual stone. In other words, they could steadily harvest 900 spiritual stones every year, which was not a small amount. If they were planted with other more precious spiritual materials, the harvest would be even greater. Ziwa thought in his heart and secretly kept it in mind. Anyway, he didn't need to take care of it himself. The requirements for planting spiritual rice were not high. If he hired handymen to do it, he only needed to check occasionally. That was enough. With 3 mu of spiritual fields, he could hire 2 handymen and still have surplus. At 100 karma points per person per year, he could still earn 700 karma points. In addition, I can also find a place to plant the 3 seeds I have. Maybe they can survive, but the 3 seeds are relatively more precious. Ordinary handymen can't take care of them well. Ziwa suddenly thought of the 3 seeds he obtained from Jiang Wudao's storage bag. These 3 seeds were specially sealed in 3 jade boxes and were carefully preserved by the other party to ensure that their spirituality was not lost. Although he didn't know what these 3 seeds were, but to be carefully preserved by the Immortal Martial sect leader, they must be extremely valuable and precious. He naturally wanted to see if he could revive these seeds. Following which, Ziwa didn't stay any longer and quickly looked towards the main peak of the Chaoyang Peak. The distance between the Chaoyang Peak and the Chaoyang Peak was about 20 li. Because of the formation, Ziwa was not like the immortal masters who could use their identity medallions to merge with the formation and have the authority to fly. Therefore, he could only travel obediently. and along the way, there were many areas that were the properties of other cultivators. Some of them were sealed by formations and belonged to the sect. Because he was unfamiliar with the place, Ziyue would sometimes take some detours. Therefore, when he arrived at the Internal Affairs Hall of the Chaoyang Peak, it was already 2 hours later. In the Chaoyang sect, karma points were everything. Without karma points, it was impossible to move an inch. Bai Ziyue wanted to live here and plan for bottleneck-breaking pills, acupores and lightning pills, and subsequent cultivation methods. Even if he wanted to start refining elixirs, he had to exchange for some elixir refining methods and materials. All of these required karma points. Therefore, Ziyue kept the mid-grade and above spirit stones and exchanged all the low-grade spirit stones in his storage bag for karma points at full speed. In addition, in a storage bag, there were many miscellaneous items that he didn't need. There were hundreds of thousands of taels of silver, materials for hunting strange beasts, and even monsters. Monster cores and other items were all exchanged by him at full speed. He directly exchanged for 6,000 karma points. 6,000 karma points, not much, not little. First, Ziyue recruited 2 handymen to take care of the spiritual fields. Then, he spent another 100 karma points to buy the spiritual rice seeds needed for 3 acres of spiritual fields. Then, he exchanged for an alchemy technique named Wonderful Jade Alchemy Method from the exchange office of the Internal Affairs Hall of the Chaoyang sect. The Wonderful Jade Alchemy Method was a method of alchemy created by an alchemist named Wonderful Jade, who integrated what he had learned. According to the introduction, with this method of alchemy, an alchemist could be promoted step by step to the level of a superior second-grade alchemist. Of course, no matter what kind of alchemy technique was used, it corresponded to the elixir recipe. Without the elixir recipe, even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. No matter how good the alchemy technique was, it was impossible to produce the corresponding elixir. Therefore, Ziyue exchanged for 6 more elixir recipes, including 3 kinds of first-grade elixirs and 3 kinds of second-grade elixirs. After the exchange, he spent a total of 3,800 karma points. Among them, the Wonderful Jade Alchemy Method cost him 2,000 karma points. As for the other 6 elixir recipes, because they were relatively common, their prices were not high. The 3 first-grade elixir recipes cost him 600 karma points, and the 3 second-grade elixir recipes cost him 1,200 karma points. In this way, with the 2 handymen and the spiritual rice seeds he exchanged for, he only had 1,900 karma points left from his original 6,000 karma points. Ziyue didn't keep the 1,900 karma points. He directly exchanged for 300 sets of alchemy materials and 100 sets of materials for each of the 3 first-grade elixir recipes. In addition, he had enough materials for all 300 sets of materials to refine the spiritual wood and some corresponding auxiliary materials. In the end, Ziyue's 6,000 karma points were all spent by him in one go. This time, the investment is not small. However, in order to reach the entry level of my alchemy technique as soon as possible, a little investment is not a big deal. As long as I reach the entry level of my alchemy technique, I can directly upgrade the Wonderful Jade Alchemy Method to the completion level with the help of the property panel. The completion level of the Wonderful Jade Alchemy Method should be able to push me to the level of a superior second-grade alchemist. At that time, I can guarantee a certain success rate when I refine second-grade elixirs. Then, I can use the alchemy method to support it. This time, the investment will be amazing. I can also earn a lot of karma points. As long as I have enough karma points, it won't be a problem whether I refine the enlightening elixir myself or exchange for it from the Chaoyang sect. Ziyue was full of hesitation and satisfaction, but his heart was full of expectation. When the night was about to fall and only a little afterglow was left on the horizon, Ziyue finally returned to his cave residence. Chapter 282. Ignoring the black puppy, Ziyue went straight to the cultivation room and took out a jade slip impatiently. The jade slip I came close to his glabella, and his mind power surged. In an instant, the information recorded in it appeared in his mind. The exquisite jade alchemy method is rich and all-encompassing. Not only does it record the identification of materials, processing, refining, and many other methods, it also includes many methods of refining pills, such as water refining, fire refining, thunder refining, and many other methods. In the process of refining pills, the methods of using pills are equally complex. At first glance, there are as many as 18 methods. When the pills are formed, there are also methods of forming pills, separating pills, and many other mysterious methods. After a long time, Ziyue's face showed a trace of confusion. Even though he already knew that refining pills was not as simple as simply following the pill formulas, when he recovered from the jade slip eye, he still felt a little weak in his heart. He suddenly understood why the status of alchemists was so high. The status of a second-stage alchemist was not inferior to that of an enlightened immortal master, but it was still so rare. The difficulty was simply too great. If he really wanted to use the various methods, pill formulas, and methods of forming and separating pills flexibly, he would need to spend a lot of time and energy. Not to mention, when an alchemist officially became a first-stage alchemist, the cost before being able to support himself was also enormous. Fortunately, I only need to raise the exquisite jade alchemy method to the beginner level. The difficulty is not as great as I thought. At worst, I could just rush over. I don't believe that 3 first-grade pill formulas and a total of 300 sets of pill refining materials can't help me succeed in this. Ziyue's heart calmed down, and his mind power surged again into the jade slip eye. Even if he really wanted to start refining pills, he had to familiarize himself with the various pill formulas, methods, and applications of the exquisite jade alchemy method. When it came to refining pills, he would not be helpless and ignorant and not know how to start. Just like that, the long night passed again. Early the next morning, the warning array sent a message, and Ziyue directly walked out of the cave residence. Soon, 2 people, one tall and one thin, followed him into the area covered by the formation. These 2 people were the handymen he had selected from the internal affairs pavilion the day before. Both of them were martial artists without any aptitude for immortal spells. One of them was about 40 years old. His name was Gao Ming, and he was a second-rate master who had opened 2 extraordinary meridians. The other one was called Fu Yongyu. He was around 30 years old, but he had already opened 12 meridians and was at the peak of a third-rate expert. The 2 of them were not weak. If they were in Wujiang County's Radiant Sun Triad, they would at least be able to obtain an elder's position. However, in Chuyang Daoist sect, they were just servants. The 2 people chosen by Ziyue were quite honest. They had 5 and 7 years of experience in planting spiritual rice respectively. Therefore, he was quite assured. After giving a few instructions, he directly returned to the quiet room for cultivation. In the afternoon, he walked out of the cave residence once again. He saw that not far away from the spiritual farm, there was a bamboo house. The weeds in the 3 mu of spiritual farm had also been burned by the fire and turned into black ashes. Greetings, Immortal Bai. Immortal Bai, you're here. Gao Ming and Fu Yongyu respectfully greeted Bai Ziyue. Bai Ziyue nodded and asked casually, "It's already past the best season to plant the spirit rice. Will it affect the growth of the spirit rice? If it's the outside world, it will naturally be affected. However, in the Chuyang Dao sect, the spiritual energy is abundant. The influence of the season is actually very small. However, Immortal Bai's 3 mu of spiritual farm has been abandoned for more than 20 years. The yield of the spiritual rice in the first season may not be very good. We estimate that the yield per mu will be about 300 pounds at most. However, in the second and third seasons, we are confident that we can increase the yield to 500 pounds per mu. The spiritual rice will ripen in 8 months. Immortal Bai, just wait for a big harvest." Gao Ming patted his chest and repeatedly promised. Ziyue nodded. He actually did not care much about the yield of the spiritual rice. In his heart, he had never thought of using this harvest to earn karma points. The reason why he invited the two of them was that he could not bear to see the 3 mu of spiritual farm abandoned. After thinking for a while, he asked again, "Then do you know anything about spiritual plants? If I have a spiritual seed and plant it in the spiritual farm, can it guarantee its survival?" Spiritual plants and spiritual rice are different. A spiritual farm suitable for spiritual rice is not necessarily suitable for spiritual plants. Spiritual rice is a spiritual item without a grade. As long as the spiritual energy in the spiritual farm is sufficient, it can survive. However, spiritual plants are usually spiritual items with grades. Grade 1 spiritual plants can only grow normally in Grade 1 spiritual farm. Grade 2 spiritual plants need Grade 2 spiritual farms. Moreover, spiritual plants are usually more delicate and require a variety of environments. It is extremely difficult for people who are not proficient in this field to grow them. Immortal Bai's 3 mu of spiritual farm should have been Grade 1 spiritual farm. However, after 20 years of abandonment, it has degenerated into Grade 1 spiritual farm. It will take some time to gradually recover to its original grade. As for spiritual plants, we may need to find another place to plant them. Fu Yongyu, who was at the side, pondered slightly and said, "Oh, is there no other way?" Ziyue raised his eyebrows and asked curiously. "There is." Fu Yongyu continued, "As long as Immortal Bai is willing, you can directly use spiritual stones to cultivate Grade 1, Grade 2, or even Grade 3 spiritual farms. However, the cost is too high. For example, a Grade 1 spiritual farm would require at least 100 low-grade spiritual stones to maintain 1 mu of land. Moreover, it can only be maintained for a month at most. After that, the cost will drop, and the gains will not make up for the losses." "I didn't expect you to know so much," Ziyue said in surprise. "My father was a spiritual plant master when he was alive. However, I was useless and did not have the aptitude for immortal spells. Therefore, I could only become a servant," Fu Yongyu said with a sad face. Ziyue nodded. Naturally, he knew that even the descendants of immortal spell cultivators would not necessarily have the aptitude for immortal spells. At most, their descendants would have a higher chance of having the aptitude for immortal spells. Fu Yongyu obviously did not inherit his father's spiritual roots and could not become an immortal spell cultivator. "Then can you help me cultivate the spiritual farm? In the early stage, you can help me cultivate a Grade 1 spiritual farm of 3 square meters. I can directly increase your karma points to 300 points per year," Ziyue said directly and decisively. "Thank you, Immortal Bai, for your appreciation." Fu Yongyu was overjoyed and his face showed incomparable excitement. Ziyue smiled and encouraged Gao Ming, who had an envious expression, with a few words, and returned to the cave residence. He was really curious about the 3 seeds that were specially sealed in the 3 jade boxes. Therefore, he was willing to pay the price to cultivate 3 more square meters of spiritual farm. Anyway, in the early stage, the cost should not be too high. He could still afford it. In the next 3 days, Ziyue did not go out of the house. Besides cultivating, he had been trying to figure out the exquisite jade elixir refining method. After 3 days, he finally had the confidence to admit that he was somewhat familiar with alchemy. Then, he took out the first elixir recipe. Grade 1 elixir recipe, Golden Spirit elixir recipe. The function of the Golden Spirit elixir was simple. It only increased the spiritual power of the cultivator, and, at the same time, it was only effective for cultivators below the 3rd level of the Qi refining stage. Generally speaking, a Golden Spirit elixir could save at least 2 months of cultivation accumulation for a cultivator at the 3rd level of the Qi refining stage. Of course, for a cultivator at the 9th level of the Qi refining stage like Ziyue, it naturally had no effect. Ziyue carefully compared the alchemy techniques of the exquisite jade elixir refining method in the past few days and thought about the feasibility. In this way, after a day, Ziyue finally had some confidence. Then he appeared in the alchemy room in the cave residence. The alchemy room was quite spacious. A luminous pearl was inlaid at the top to ensure that it was bright. There was also a skylight that could be used for ventilation to ensure that the airflow could circulate. This alchemy room is already not bad. Zue took a deep breath. His nervous mood was slightly relaxed, and then he looked at the attribute panel. Exquisite Jade Elixir Refining Method, not beginner, 3%. This was the progress of his alchemy technique in the past few days, and there had been no change for 2 days now. He knew in his heart that it was unlikely to be of any use if he simply tried to figure it out. Alchemy was the most important. If he wanted to improve his alchemy progress, he naturally had to try it out, and he did not want to continue waiting. So, his mental strength surged. Boom! A muffled sound came out. A 7 feet tall and 5 feet wide alchemy cauldron dropped down and landed firmly in the center of the alchemy room. It was the spirit weapon level alchemy furnace that Zue obtained from Jiang Wudao's storage bag. For an alchemist who is not even a beginner to use a spirit weapon level alchemy furnace, I don't know if it's a waste of talent. Zue thought in his heart, and his mental strength spread out again. A large pile of blood red wood appeared on the side. This blood red wood was called blood spirit wood. When it was calcined, not only was the temperature extremely high, but the firepower was also extremely stable. It was most suitable for beginners like him. Next, there were neatly arranged sets of materials needed to refine the golden spirit pill. Zue only took out 10 sets first. Let's start. With this thought in mind, Zue's movements were very fast. He put in the blood spirit wood, condensed a layer of fire at his fingertips, and ignited it instantly. Whoosh whoosh. The fire burned fiercely, illuminating the entire alchemy room with a red light. Vaguely, there was a layer of incense coming from the blood spirit wood. This was the characteristic of the blood dragon wood. This incense was like a dharma incense that could gradually calm one's mind. After feeling that the temperature of the alchemy furnace had reached a certain level, Zue quickly picked up the main material of the golden spirit pill, the golden spirit flower, and threw it into the alchemy furnace. Chi! Under the high temperature, the golden spirit flower melted quickly at an alarming speed. Zue hurriedly cast a spell to slow it down. Poof! Chapter 283. A scorched black smoke rose from the ground. He failed. Obviously, he did not grasp the timing of the pill art well. It was too late. However, even though he had failed, Zue did not stop what he was doing. He continued to refine the elixir step by step. 5 minutes later, the entire process was completed. All that was left in the alchemy furnace was a charred black. Refining elixir is indeed not that easy. It requires the alchemist's hands, eyes, mental strength, spiritual energy, the use of the pill art, and the control of the fire. All of these must be done at the right time to make the elixir. It is many times more difficult than crafting talismans. This time, I was able to discover 13 mistakes. Since I failed from the start, there must be more mistakes that I did not discover. Looking at the remnants of the failed elixir in the alchemy furnace, Zue tore a cleansing talisman expressionlessly and started to ponder silently. From the start, he knew that refining elixir would not be that simple. He was also prepared to fail countless times. Although it was unexpected for him to fail right from the start, it was not something that he could not accept. To him, the most important thing was to discover the mistakes. As long as he knew where the mistakes were, he could correct them immediately. This failure was not meaningless. Continue. Half an hour later, Zue felt that he had a more reliable way to deal with the mistakes. He also gained some experience from the wondrous jade alchemy method. Then, he started to try again. This time, Zue's attitude was much more serious. He immersed his mental strength and became one with the alchemy furnace. Huff! The flames rose. The temperature in the alchemy furnace began to rise steadily under the control of the spiritual weapon. When the temperature reached a certain level, Zue calmly threw the golden spirit flower into the alchemy furnace. Tisk! Under the high temperature, the golden spirit flower began to melt quickly. Zue, who was already prepared, took the opportunity to cast a pill art. The melting speed began to slow down. Then, he methodically threw in the second ingredient. Fusing materials was never a simple matter. Even though Ziyue hurriedly used another pill art, it was still too late. The fused materials were incomparably modeled. Even though the pill refinement this time was not a complete failure, it had already lost the possibility of success. Just like before, Ziyue did not stop and continued to follow the same routine. As expected, it failed. This time, out of the previous mistakes, there are still 7 that haven't been completely resolved. At the same time, I've also found 11 mistakes that need to be improved. While Ziyue was cleaning the furnace, he once again began to summarize and analyze. After pondering for a long time, when he felt that he had a certain degree of confidence, he began to refine again. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, time and time again, his expression remained calm and composed, appearing to be methodical. Of course, the result was the same as well. Failure, failure, failure. Ziyue gradually became numb. After a total of 10 times, he finally stopped. 10 attempts, and all 10 attempts ended in failure. However, it wasn't like they didn't gain anything. At least every time, I feel that I've improved. I reckon that after a few more attempts, I'll be able to succeed. Following the continuous failures, Ziyue's confidence gradually rose. After 10 times of refining pills, he could clearly feel that he had improved. Some of the pill arts began to be used more skillfully. His grasp of timing also began to become more precise. The control of the fire, the various changes that occurred during the refining process, he gradually had a set of his own methods of dealing with them. Success is already a certainty. I reckon that at most, I only need to refine 5 more times, and I'll be able to successfully refine a spiritual pill. Ziyue's heart was somewhat hesitant, but he still suppressed the thought of continuing to try and walked out of the pill refining room. Continuous refining was a kind of pressure on his mental strength, spiritual energy, and mind. He also needed to relax and adjust his state of mind. The wondrous jade pill refining technique has already been upgraded to the level of uninitiated 12%. Sure enough, practice is the best way to test all the truth. With continuous trials, the speed of my pill refining technique naturally increased greatly. Glancing at the attribute panel, Ziyue's face could not help but reveal a trace of joy. According to this progress, in less than 10 days, he would be able to officially initiate the wondrous jade pill refining technique. 10 days, not long, Ziyue thought in his heart and immediately walked out of the cave residence. What entered his sight was 3 mu of spiritual fields that had been plowed and flattened. Not far from the spiritual fields, Gao Ming and Fu Yongyu were vigorously waving their iron hoes. The hardness of the soil under the hose seemed to be extremely shocking. Even though the 2 of them were not weak and their inner strength was vigorous, they could only dig out a small piece of soil. Has the spiritual rice been planted? Ziyue walked over curiously and asked. Yes, it was just planted not long ago. Although these 3 mu of spiritual fields have already degraded, the foundation is still there, so the growth is not bad. I saw the seeds planted yesterday, early this morning, and a few of them have already sprouted. If there is a spiritual rain to irrigate them, then their growth will be even more gratifying. Gao Ming said with a face of joy. Is that so? Ziyue curiously got closer and soon saw a seed that had indeed sprouted from it. After thinking for a while, his mental strength surged. Dark clouds gathered and fog surrounded him. A spell was immediately cast by him. Little Cloud, Rain Technique. This Dharma spell was actually a spiritual plant Dharma spell. He was lacking in spells back then, so he learned it in passing. It was just right to cast it now. Pitter, patter, patter. Continuous raindrops immediately fell, and all of them irrigated the 3 mu of spiritual fields. Almost visible to the naked eye, the sprouts of the seeds broke out of their shells and grew out. It was quite gratifying. Immortal spell. Gao Ming and Fu Yongyu's eyes were immediately filled with envy and awe. In addition, There's actually a spring thunder rain formation in this spiritual field. You can activate it every once in a while to irrigate the spiritual field. Ziyue pondered for a while, then threw the spring thunder rain formation talisman to them and let them take care of it themselves. Thank you, Immortal Bai. The two of them hurriedly thanked him. Immortal Bai, this is the spiritual field that I have opened up according to your request. Because of the years of spiritual energy irrigation, the spiritual soil is very hard like stone, so it seems to be a little slow. However, we should be able to dig up all the spiritual fields by today. Next, we just need to mix some spiritual soil materials and soak it with spirit stones. Gradually, it will become a first-grade spiritual field. Seeing Ziyue's gaze on the field that he had opened up, Fu Yongyu hurriedly said, "How long will it take for the first-grade spiritual field to take shape?" Ziyue nodded and asked curiously, 10 days. At most, 10 days will be enough. These few days, we walked around and found a spiritual spring with a little spiritual energy 3 miles away from here. With the spiritual spring's irrigation, 7 or 8 days will be enough. Fu Yongyu said confidently, "That's good. This is a middle-grade spirit stone, which is equivalent to 100 low-grade spirit stones. Next, I may need to go into seclusion for a while. The rest will be entirely up to you." After a few observations, he had a preliminary recognition of the two. Anyway, a middle-grade spirit stone was not much, so he did not mind and directly threw it to Fu Yongyu. "Thank you for your trust, Immortal Bai," Fu Yongyu said with a face full of excitement. Back in the alchemy room, Ziyue adjusted his mood and began refining again. Once, twice, thrice, because of the previous 10 failures, Ziyue seemed to be more proficient. Every time he refined, he could feel improvement. Alchemy formation technique. Ziyue's mind power was activated and a spell was cast. Like a mysterious spiritual energy, it turned into a green light and fell into the alchemy furnace. Buzz! In an instant, a pale white mucus mixed together and formed a pale white ball the size of a baby's fist. "It's done." Ziyue was surprised and quickly controlled the elixir to fly out of the alchemy furnace. He reached out, and the elixir, which was still hot, fell into his hand. Ziyue's eyes fell on the elixir, and the spiritual eye technique was activated. The art of pill identification flowed in his mind, and the surprise in his eyes quickly faded. It's a success, but there are a lot of impurities. At least half of the impurities are mixed in. These impurities often contain terrible toxins and will cause damage to the cultivator's body. This golden spiritual elixir looks like a spiritual elixir, but it is more like a poisonous elixir. After a cultivator takes it, he will probably be attacked by the elixir poison before his strength can increase. A faint look of disappointment flashed in Ziyue's eyes. The formation of the elixir did not mean that it would be able to work. If the elixir was too impure, elixir poison would be produced and the cultivator would be attacked. For example, in Dongxian Market, the guide had said that the guide's uncle had been paralyzed for 3 months because he had eaten an elixir that contained elixir poison. However, no matter what, this is a successful start. At least this time, it's formed into an elixir. Taking a deep breath, Ziyue quickly pulled himself together. The formation of the golden spiritual elixir meant that there were not many mistakes in his previous refining method. What affected the quality of the elixir were more details. Next, he just needed to keep adjusting, and he would naturally be able to refine an elixir that could be consumed. Thinking of this, he did not hesitate and began refining again. 50% impurities, no. 47% impurities. There's an improvement, but it's still not enough. At the very least, I need to ensure that the elixir contains less than 30% impurities so that it will not affect the cultivator too much and can be used without worry. 48%? And it's regressed? But at least I know where the mistake is. Next, I just need to adjust, and I should be able to improve a lot. 38%, 37%, 35%. Soon, just a little bit more. Ziyue continued to adjust and refine. His mind was completely immersed in it, and he felt like he did not know how much time had passed. The quality of the golden spiritual elixir he refined also improved as he improved. Finally, when Ziyue pulled the elixir out of the cauldron for the 53rd time, a look of joy flashed in his eyes. Success. Chapter 284. 30% of impurities can already be considered a successful spirit pill. This journey has not been easy. Ziyue looked at the spirit pill in his hand and thought of the countless failures he had experienced before. He was extremely excited and exhilarated. Even if this spirit pill was of no use to him and could not help his strength in the slightest. However, the joy of this success was incomparable. It made him extremely happy and excited. Now, I can also be considered a first-grade alchemist, right? Ziyue could not help but smile. To be able to successfully refine a first-grade spirit pill, one could be considered a first-grade alchemist. Now, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was a first-grade alchemist. Although the only pill he could successfully refine was the golden spiritual pill, it was still the golden spiritual pill. I didn't expect that 3 days had passed without me noticing. And my exquisite jade alchemy method, after 3 days of continuous refinement, has indeed improved greatly and has reached 45% of the uninitiated level. I am one step closer to the uninitiated level. In addition, after this period of cultivation, the 5 elements pure yuan technique has finally reached 99% of the uninitiated level. And this is because I've put all my effort into refining spirit pills. Otherwise, the progress would be even faster. Ziyue's eyes moved slightly and glanced at the attribute panel. He could not help but feel a sense of satisfaction. If the improvement of the exquisite jade alchemy method was still within his expectations, then the improvement of the 5 elements pure yuan technique was somewhat out of his expectations. Although this technique did not actually stop circulating when he was refining spirit pills, because he did not deliberately control it, the circulation speed of the 5 elements pure yuan technique was naturally very unsatisfactory. He did not expect that unknowingly it had improved to the limit. No matter what, it is still a good thing. In this case, maybe when I have improved the exquisite jade alchemy method to the uninitiated level, this technique will also be able to reach the uninitiated level. Thinking of this, Ziyue did not deliberately pursue the uninitiated level of this technique. Instead, he put his mind back on refining spirit pills. At the end of the day, what he urgently wanted to improve was still his alchemy method. This was because it was related to whether he could exchange for the barrier-breaking pill and refine the aperture enlightening pill. As for the 5-directional pure origin technique, he was in no hurry. Hence, after resting for a while, Ziyue stood up again after his mental power and spiritual power had recovered to their peak state, and he immersed himself in refining pills again. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. Ziyue continued to refine pills. His use of alchemy arts, his control of the flame's temperature, and his response to the various changes that occurred during alchemy had become more skillful and flexible. One by one, the golden spirit pills were refined by him. Although he would occasionally fail due to various reasons, he was able to guarantee success 7 or 8 times out of 10. A kind of confidence involuntarily grew in his heart. Although these golden spiritual pills weren't a high grade, they were still of a high grade. Impurities between 30% and 20% were considered low-grade spirit pills, 20% to 10% were middle-grade spirit pills, and 10% to 0% were high-grade spirit pills. The spirit pills he refined were at best low-grade spirit pills. 100 sets of materials have been used up. Suddenly, Ziyue paused for a moment before he came back to his senses. The materials for the golden spirit pill were all used up. 100 sets of materials and a total of 36 golden spirit pills were refined. The loss wasn't that much. As for the progress of the exquisite jade alchemy method, it has now reached 63% of the uninitiated level. Although it is lower than what I originally expected, it is not slow. Coincidentally, I also feel that it is difficult to continue to improve the exquisite jade alchemy method with only one type of spirit pill. Now that the materials have been used up, it is time for me to refine another type of spirit pill. Ziyue looked at the attribute panel. His face was calm, but he had a plan in mind. Immediately, without hesitation, he took out another spirit pill recipe from the storage bag and began to study it. This time, the recipe was naturally still a first-grade spirit pill called the Vitality Cultivation Pill. It was a healing-type spirit pill. If it was successfully refined, its value would be higher than the golden spirit pill. Information about the Vitality Cultivation Pill flashed in his mind. Ziyue's eyes fell on the recipe again. Based on his previous experience, he began to carefully study it. An hour later, Ziyue took out the materials for the Vitality Cultivation Pill and began to officially refine it. The first step was to immerse his mind and then ignite the blood spirit wood to control the temperature in the alchemy furnace. Because this time he was refining the Vitality Cultivation Pill, the main material was a type of spirit insect called the one-horned golden cicada. It was hard and fire-resistant, so the temperature in the alchemy furnace was much higher than when he was refining the golden spirit pill. He threw in the spirit insect's shell. Under the high temperature, the shell gradually melted and began to liquefy. Ziyue's hands moved slightly. Under the spread of his mind power, he quickly cast a pill art. In an instant, the temperature in the alchemy furnace dropped rapidly. Then, he hurriedly threw in another material into the alchemy furnace. It's too late. The moment the material was thrown in, Ziyue's heart skipped a beat. He understood that it was too late. Sure enough, under the low temperature, the material began to melt after a while. At this time, the spirit insect's shell began to solidify, so the materials fused and there was resistance. Needless to say, there was only a charred residue left in the alchemy cauldron in the time it took to complete the refinement process. It's another path of alchemy where I've made mistakes. If I don't have a good mentality, even if I have the talent for alchemy, it would be difficult for me to persevere. Ziyue refined the spirit pill in an orderly manner. He constantly concluded from mistakes and improved from failures. In his heart, he gradually became numb. Once, twice, thrice failure, failure, and failure. Even though he was prepared for this, he still felt extremely uncomfortable when he experienced this feeling of failure again and again. This was a kind of destruction to his confidence. If he didn't feel his own improvement every time and could see the improvement in his cultivation of the exquisite jade alchemy method, he really wouldn't have been able to persevere. The 9th time, I finally succeeded. Even though this spirit augmentation pill is actually a waste pill with more than 50% impurities, it's a poisonous pill. Suddenly, Ziyue's eyes lit up, and he was slightly excited. The consecutive failures had somewhat affected his mentality. The 32nd time, the impurities of the spirit augmentation pill are below 30%. I've succeeded. The 67th time, the exquisite jade alchemy method's progress has reached 87%. I'm about to reach the entry level. The 69th time, I've actually reached the entry level of the 5 elements pure yuan technique. With this, my chances of breaking through to the aperture awakening stage have increased. The 91st time, the exquisite jade alchemy method's progress has finally reached 99%. I'm only one step away from reaching the entry level. Ziyue's cave was sealed. In the alchemy room, the fire almost didn't stop. As he refined continuously, even with the ventilation, the temperature in the room was extremely shocking. However, he didn't pay any attention to it. All his attention was focused on refining the pill. Suddenly, Ziyue's expression froze and his mind went blank for a moment. Then, very quickly, a glimmer of light appeared in his eyes. He had reached the entry level. He had reached the entry level of the exquisite jade alchemy method. For a total of 9 days and nights, he had continuously refined the pill. He had failed time and time again. He had concluded and tried again and again. Finally, at this moment, he had officially reached the entry level. His heart surging, Ziyue found it difficult to suppress the joy in his heart. However, he quickly calmed himself down and looked at the alchemy cauldron again. There was still a spirit pill in the process of being refined. Perhaps it was because he had reached the entry level of the exquisite jade alchemy method. But when Ziwa was refining the pill, he had more experience than before. He was handling the process more smoothly, and even the efficiency of refining the pill had increased by a little. A few minutes later, the last spirit pill formula was formed. Buzz! A light green spirit pill shot out from the alchemy cauldron and quickly landed in his hand. A grade 1 spirit pill. As expected, after reaching the entry level of the exquisite jade alchemy method, the grade of the spirit pills I refined has increased by a little. Ziwa smiled in his heart. He took out another porcelain bottle and placed the spirit augmentation pill inside. Compared to the golden spirit pill, the success rate of the spirit augmentation pill was much higher. Now that he had used up all the materials, he had a total of 58 spirit pills. In terms of income and expenditure, he finally began to balance out and did not lose too much. Next, Ziwa pondered for a moment and walked out of the alchemy room. In a spacious courtyard in the market of a remote cloud mountain, a middle-aged man in a long green robe stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were as deep as the stars, and he stood there with his hands behind his back. Just by standing there, he looked very majestic and gave people a feeling of looking up to a tall mountain. He slightly narrowed his eyes and looked at the two people in front of him. It was obviously October, but the two of them were sweating profusely and were a little scared. "How is it?" he asked softly. In an instant, as if the ice and snow had melted, the two of them heaved a sigh of relief. Then, one of them took half a step forward and said in a low voice, "We haven't heard much at the moment. We only know that he entered the Morning Sun sect under the guidance of the two enlightened immortal masters, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhu Shuizhen. Now, he has become an official disciple of the Morning Sun sect. Also, it's worth mentioning that Zhu Shuizhen announced that she had accepted a disciple some time ago. It was the little girl who came with him." Speaking of this, the man's face turned slightly ugly, as if he had thought of something extremely regrettable. Zhu Shuizhen is the immortal master of the Morning Sun sect's Hall of Inheritance. It has been 20 years since she last accepted a disciple. There is only one possibility for her to suddenly accept a disciple. That girl's talent must be very shocking, and it may not be as simple as a first-grade talent. Could it be a supreme-grade celestial spirit root? The middle-aged man frowned slightly. In an instant, the two people in front of him were sweating profusely again. Chapter 285. These two people were Gong Fei and Su Zhishuan from the Tao Accomplishment sect. The two of them had the opportunity to take the little girl Zhao Yuer into their sect, but they missed it because of their short-sightedness. Fortunately, the sect master doesn't know about this. The two of them looked at the middle-aged man in awe and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Then they were gloating. If they only felt regret, then Zhao Ziyun and Gu Hao from the Kunwu Sword sect would probably be heartbroken. The little girl was about to become a disciple of their sect, but she followed Ziyue to the Choyang sect. After all, this is the territory of the Choyang sect. We can't stay here forever. The middle-aged man's gaze fell on the two of them again and said, "I'll give you a month's time. No matter the cost, you must lure him out." "Yes." The two of them felt a chill in their hearts and quickly nodded. The wondrous jade, alchemy method, and the 5-direction pure yuan technique are already at the entry level. Next, it's time for me to upgrade them. Ziyue's gaze fell on the attribute panel, and he felt a burst of joy in his heart. The wondrous jade, alchemy method could be upgraded to perfection. At least, it would allow him to become an advanced second-grade alchemist, and he would have the ability to refine the awakening pill. The 5-direction pure yuan technique could make his spiritual power purer and more powerful, almost equal to the elemental power of an immortal master in the awakening realm. Not only could it increase his strength again, but it could also increase the probability of opening the apertures by 30%. The effect was better than the bottleneck-breaking pill. This technique and cultivation method were very important to him, and at this time, he could not wait. Consume 209,824 points of spiritual power to upgrade the wondrous jade alchemy method to perfection. The amount of spiritual power required is indeed a lot. Upgrade. After muttering to himself, Baizue chose to level up without any hesitation. Baizue narrowed his eyes. In an instant, he felt countless profound understandings of alchemy flowing in his mind. The prediction of the fusion and changes of various materials, the use of alchemy techniques, the control of flames, and many other alchemy techniques seemed to be naturally engraved in his mind. He was extremely familiar with them. Moreover, he seemed to have really experienced alchemy countless times, and there was an inexplicable sense of calmness about him. The wondrous jade alchemy technique has finally reached perfection. Baizue's eyes lit up, and he could not help but have an epiphany. In terms of alchemy skills, I should have reached the level of advanced second grade now, so I can prepare to refine the Acupore's awakening pill. When he thought about refining the gold spirit pill and the soul augmenting pill, it really felt like dealing with 1 + 1 + 2 math problems. It was incomparably simple. I can easily refine them with a 100% success rate. Moreover, the quality of the refined spirit pill would at least be a high first-grade spirit pill. At this moment, he was really a little anxious, as if he could not wait to refine the second-grade spirit pill. He even immediately got up and prepared the materials needed to refine the awakening pill according to the pill recipe, clearing the last obstacle for his immortal art to open the apertures. After a while, he suppressed the thoughts in his heart, and then his gaze fell on the 5-direction pure yuan technique. Consumed 209,411 points of spiritual power to upgrade the 5-direction pure yuan technique to perfection. Upgrade. Taking a deep breath, Ziyue chose to upgrade. Buzz. In an instant, a steaming spiritual power quickly flowed through his body, passing through the 5 spiritual apertures, constantly rotating, constantly refining, and constantly purifying. Waves of thick, liquid-like spiritual power gradually formed. Like mercury, it flowed in his dantian. Occasionally, its aura would be revealed. It gave people a feeling of quickness, naturalness, and immortal-like aura. Although he was not an immortal master who had opened the apertures, he already had the spiritual pressure of an immortal master who had opened the apertures. Is this the perfection of the 5-direction pure yuan technique? The spiritual power has been purified and compressed to the extreme, almost completely condensing into a liquid state, comparable to the origin energy of an immortal master who had opened the apertures. With such a dense and powerful spiritual power, the success rate of a breakthrough is indeed much higher than that of an ordinary 9th-level Qi condensation cultivator. In addition, if I use this almost liquid spiritual power to cast a Dharma artifact or Dharma spell, Ziyue's eyes moved, and a small golden sword turned into a stream of light. Puff! Without a sound, it pierced deeply into the ground, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. The flying sword's speed has more than doubled compared to before, and its power has also more than doubled compared to before. Ziyue secretly compared the changes before and after the improvement of the 5-direction pure yuan technique. He could not help but be amazed. This was just using the flying sword, and its power was already so strong. If he cast a Dharma spell, wouldn't the increase in power be even more shocking? Perhaps the strength of my immortal master now should be comparable to an early-stage immortal master who had opened the apertures. Ziyue thought to himself, shook his head, and waved his hand to summon the flying sword back. Only the unknown would cause fear. Back then, Fan Xingyu had used her sword to easily defeat Kai Sun, a Khanate stage martial artist. That had left a deep impression on him. When he faced other enlightened immortal masters, he could not help but feel a little hesitant. Perhaps only when he had a life-or-death battle with an immortal master who had opened the apertures Could he truly face such an existence calmly? After the improvement, my spiritual power has decreased greatly, leaving me with only 970,000 points. Although it's still a lot, I can predict that with the improvement of my strength, the spiritual power required to upgrade various cultivation methods, martial arts techniques, and immortal spells will also increase. Less than 1 million points of spiritual power is actually not enough. Ziyue glanced at the attribute panel. Although he was happy that the wondrous jade alchemy method and the 5-direction pure yuan technique had been perfected, he still felt a sense of urgency when his spiritual power dropped below 1 million points. Of course, he did not need to worry in the short term. Therefore, after 9 days of seclusion, he finally got up, opened the ceiling array of the cave abode, and walked out. Immortal Bai, you've come out of seclusion. Immortal Bai, you've come to right time. I've already upgraded the spiritual land to the 1st grade spiritual land according to your request. Because you've given me enough spiritual stones, the spiritual land's grade has even reached the mid-grade of the 1st grade. As soon as Yue appeared, Gao Ming and Fu Yongyu approached him and said respectfully, "Oh, bring me to see it." Bai Ziyue's expression changed as he hurriedly followed them to the side of the 30% spiritual field. The spiritual land had already been turned over, and with the irrigation of the spiritual spring water, a fresh smell of soil and spiritual energy mixed together spread out. It's indeed the mid-grade of the 1st grade spiritual land. It seems that you put in all the mid-grade spiritual stones. Sensing the changes in the spiritual land, Ziyue was somewhat satisfied. He looked to the other side and saw that the crescent rice had all grown in the 3 acres of spiritual land. It looked very green, and it was quite pleasing. After pondering for a while, he finally opened his mouth and said, "As the saying goes, those who have done well will be rewarded, and those who have done wrong will be punished. Here are 3 golden spirit pills. Consider it as a reward for you." As for Gao Ming, the growth of the crescent rice is not bad. These 2 golden spirit pills are also considered your contribution. As he spoke, he flipped his hand, and 2 porcelain bottles appeared, and he handed them to the 2 of them. "Thank you for your reward, Immortal Bai." The 2 of them hurriedly thanked him and said excitedly, although the 1st grade, low-grade golden spirit pills were not very helpful to them, there were still good things that were worth 1 karma point. Naturally, the 2 of them were happy. A sense of gratitude welled up in his heart. Naturally, they had been hired by other immortals before. However, not to mention rewards, those people's attitude towards them was extremely bad. It was as if they were really a group of slaves who were ordered around by others, and they were very harsh. It could be said that there were very few people like Bai Ziyue who had such a peaceful attitude and treated them so generously. Ignoring the changes in their expressions, Bai Ziyue directly stepped into the 30% spiritual field. I wonder if the 3 seeds can take root and grow in this mid-grade of the 1st grade spiritual land. Bai Ziyue squatted down and carefully dug out a small hole in the ground, not caring about anything else. Then, with a flip of his hand, a jade box that was sealed by the prohibition talisman appeared in his hand. Opening the jade box, a black seed that was the size of a baby's fist and faintly exuded a vitality appeared in front of him. Without much hesitation, he poured out the seed, covered it with soil, and bought it directly. Following that, he did the same thing. He planted the other 2 seeds of different sizes and colors more than a meter apart. Next, I don't care and let them grow. Ziyue thought to himself. In the end, he still used a minor cloud and rain skill to moisturize the soil again. Then, he simply put down a few formation plates and 7 or 8 formation flags to set up a protective formation to prevent them from being eaten by birds and other creatures. Only then did he feel relieved. After instructing the 2 of them to inform him immediately if there were any changes, Ziyue once again returned to the abode of immortals. He went directly to the alchemy room as if he was familiar with the place. Let's begin. Whether it is to exchange bottleneck-breaking elixirs and orifices-enlightening elixirs from the Internal Affairs Pavilion of the Chaiyang sect, or to prepare the materials myself, and refine the orifices enlightening elixirs according to the elixir recipes. I need karma points, which are spiritual stones. For me now, there is no faster way to earn spiritual stones than refining elixirs. Ziyue's eyes moved, and a large pile of materials for refining elixirs appeared beside him. There were a total of 100 sets of materials, all of which were materials for refining the first-grade elixir, the cosmetic elixir. Although the cosmetic elixir did not have much effect on a cultivator's strength, it had the effect of delaying aging, whitening, and moisturizing the skin. It was necessary for both male and female cultivators. In comparison, the market was more popular. Of course, Ziyue just wanted to try his hand at the first-grade elixir. What he really wanted to refine was the second-grade elixir, which was more valuable. Anyway, it would not take long, right? Chapter 286. The blood spirit wood was piled up, and the flames were ignited. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. Feeling that the temperature of the furnace had reached a certain level, Ziyue hurriedly threw 100 dragonfish whiskers into the furnace. The dragonfish whiskers were one of the main ingredients of the beauty elixir. Normally, 1 dragonfish whisker could only be used to refine 1 beauty elixir. Ziyue was obviously planning to smelt 100 beauty elixirs in one go and refine a large batch of elixirs. This was an attempt, but also a challenge. Even though Ziyue was already an upper second-grade elixir master, he still looked dignified at this moment. Under the calcination of the flames, the dragonfish whiskers were quickly smelted. A series of alchemy spells were cast, and the light green liquid that was smelted by the dragonfish fused into one. As it spun, traces of impurities were thrown out. Then, under the high temperature, they were turned into black smoke and expelled from the alchemy cauldron. This was the skill of an upper second-grade elixir master. It was as if he was born with it. He knew how to deal with the situation in order to ensure the success rate of the elixir refinement. At this moment, Ziyue was calm. He knew that he was confident that he could complete the elixir refinement. All kinds of ingredients were thrown into the furnace in an orderly manner. Casting one pill art after another, he could always achieve the effect he wanted. Occasionally, he would add or subtract the blood spirit wood and use the pill art to control the temperature. In the blink of an eye, half an hour passed. Elixir complete. With a slight pinch of his hand, the spiritual energy in his body turned into a stream of light and rushed into the furnace. In an instant, the furnace shook slightly and an elixir the size of an adult's head was formed. It's not over yet. A light flashed in by Ziyue's eyes as he changed his hand seal once more. He formed hand seals with both hands, connecting the heaven and earth. His mental energy and spiritual energy combined to form a special seal. Buzz! The green light shot out and entered the cauldron. Elixir splitting technique. In an instant, the huge elixir began to split automatically. 1 split into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. In the blink of an eye, a total of 128 beauty elixirs were split. The pills are done. Keep. Finally, he used the pill condensing art. Like swallows returning to their nest, the beauty-nourishing pills rushed out of the furnace one by one. Ziyue, who was already prepared, took out a purple gold gourd and stored all the beauty-nourishing pills inside. This purple gold gourd wasn't really a treasure. It was just a gourd condensed from a type of spirit vine. Because it had the innate ability to lock in spirit energy, it was very suitable for storing spirit pills and other items. Ziyue spent 1 contribution point and received a total of 8. 100 portions of materials, a total of 128 beauty-nourishing pills. Moreover, these beauty-nourishing pills are of decent quality. Among them, 56 of them were advanced grade, 1 elixirs, while the rest were intermediate grade, 1 elixirs. After conversion, this gourd of age-preserving elixirs is worth at least 500 karma points. Bai Ziyue's eyes lit up, and a satisfied look appeared on his face. Next up are the second-grade spirit pills, the emerald jade pill, the Vitality Recovery Pill, and the Vitality Recovery Pill. With this in mind, Ziyue tore open a cleaning talisman. After cleaning the furnace, he began to prepare. 3 days later, Ziyue walked out of the abode. Without stopping, he went straight to the Chaoyang Peak, the main peak of the Chaoyang sect. The refining of second-grade elixirs is much more difficult than that of first-grade elixirs. Even with my ability as an advanced grade 2 elixir refiner, the success rate is only about 80%. Of course, the most important factor is the flame. The temperature of the blood spirit wood is too high for me to refine second-grade elixirs. If I didn't use the spiritual fire spell and the geocentric fire spell to maintain the temperature, even the materials wouldn't be able to melt. However, magic spells are often extremely violent. It's not as easy to control as the flame of the blood spirit would. Even though I've already practiced these two spells to perfection and can control them at will, and this spiritual weapon alchemy furnace has the effect of adjusting the temperature, the success rate and quality of the elixirs are still affected. Ziyue pondered silently and felt a little helpless. He really didn't consider this point. Using magic spells to refine elixirs indeed increased the difficulty of refining elixirs, not to mention the consumption. Next time, it's best to go to the Elixir Refining Pavilion. The Elixir Refining Pavilion of the Chaoyang sect is directly connected to the earth fire. With the formation to suppress the earth chi and remove the fire poison, the earth fire is relatively mild, although it's hot. It's very suitable for refining elixirs. It's not only easier to refine elixirs there, but also the success rate and quality of elixirs will increase. However, it's said that only recognized elixir refiners are qualified to use the earth fire for refining elixirs. It seems that I also need to go there to prove it. It just so happens that having the identity of an elixir refiner is also beneficial to me. Ziyue thought to himself. Without stopping, he went to the Internal Affairs Pavilion of the Chaoyang Peak with ease. By the time he left the Internal Affairs Pavilion, there were already 6,000 karma points on his identity token. Of course, these karma points were exchanged for the elixirs he refined. He knew that if he sold them to the Internal Affairs Hall, the price would be relatively lower. If he sold them to other brothers or went directly to the marketplace of Yinshao Mountain, which was only dozens of miles away from the Chaoyang sect, he would definitely get more spiritual stones. However, he didn't want to waste time, because even if there were more, it wouldn't be much more. With the time to go back and forth, he would earn more from refining elixirs. I didn't expect that after going around in circles, my karma points have recovered to the level of 6,000 points. Ziyue thought to himself. Without stopping, he went directly to the Elixir Refining Pavilion. The Elixir Refining Pavilion of the Chaoyang sect was not on the main peak of the Chaoyang Peak, but on the top of the Wanyang Peak, which was not far away. Perhaps because it was connected to the earth fire, the Wanyang Peak was relatively low and divided into two sides. The Elixir Refining Pavilion was on the east side, and the Weapon Refining Pavilion was on the west side. Perhaps because it was close to the Chaoyang Peak, a third-grade spiritual land, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth on the Wanyang Peak was also very abundant. The ethereal mist of spiritual chi surrounded the Wanyang Peak. When an ordinary person breathed in, his body would feel lighter and more comfortable. Recuperating in such a place for 10 days to half a month could delay even the most serious illness. It could really prolong one's life. Although the Wanyang Peak itself was only a first-grade spiritual vein, Ziyue estimated that the spiritual chi here was actually not weaker than that of a second-grade spiritual vein. The Elixir Refining Pavilion didn't prohibit ordinary disciples from entering. Every day, many disciples, even martial artists and handymen, would send some elixir refining materials here. Compared to the Internal Affairs Pavilion, the Elixir Refining Pavilion would naturally give more karma points. However, if one wanted to enter the Elixir Refining Pavilion, he had to be an elixir refining master. In order to make it more convenient for him to refine the Orifice's awakening elixir in the future, and because of his identity as an elixir refining master, it would indeed be more convenient for him to collect many materials. Therefore, he directly found a manager of the elixir refining pavilion. This manager looked to be about 40 years old. His cultivation wasn't high, only at the 6th level of the chi refinement stage. However, as he walked, he seemed to be quite proud. Even a cultivator at the 9th level of the chi refinement stage would not dare to slight him in his elixir refining robe. A first-grade elixir refining master. Ziyue glanced at the identity token that the other party deliberately showed and understood in his heart. The elixir refining pavilion doesn't restrict anyone from applying to join, but you have to prove that you are an elixir refining master. In other words, you have to pass our test before we will approve of you. We will give you the identity of an elixir refining master on the identity token and give you the corresponding elixir refining robe. He looked at Ziyue and said in a calm tone, "Of course, there's no problem." Ziyue said in a relaxed tone, "Follow me. Which first-grade elixir are you good at? Since you dared to participate in the test, you must have some confidence. However, I have to remind you that you only have 3 chances. If you fail all 3 times, then you'll have to pay for the expenses of this assessment." Gu Qingfeng said with a casual expression. In fact, he didn't think much of Ziyue. It wasn't that he thought that he would definitely fail, but he knew that a disciple like Ziyue, who had reached the 9th level of the Qi refinement stage at such a young age, would not be able to study the profession of an elixir refining master. What they most urgently wanted was to become an enlightened master immortal. The reason why they tried so hard to become an elixir refining master was actually a way to raise their status. Because of their identity as an elixir refining master, when they applied to exchange for bottleneck-breaking elixirs and enlightening elixirs, their rankings would be relatively early. Perhaps they would not have to wait 3, 6, or even 9 years before they could exchange for these 2 types of elixirs. In fact, it was not difficult to become an elixir refining master. As long as an immortal spell cultivator was willing to spend 1 or 2,000 karma points to refine only one type of elixir, they would generally be able to guarantee a success rate and become a beginner first-grade elixir refining master. The most difficult thing for an elixir refining master was the road to promotion. Beginner first-grade elixir refining masters were not rare, but middle-grade elixir refining masters were much rarer. Usually, only 1 out of 10 elixir refining masters would be promoted. Advanced first-grade elixir refining masters like himself were even rarer. This was also the reason why he was able to become a steward despite his low cultivation level. What I want to refine is not a first-grade elixir, but a second-grade one. A second-grade elixir, green jade elixir. Ziyue said calmly. What? Gu Qingfeng was shocked and suddenly stopped. He looked at Ziyue in disbelief and asked, "What elixir are you going to refine?" "A second-grade elixir, green jade elixir." Bai Ziyue wasn't surprised at all as he spoke again. "You are a second-grade elixir refining master?" Gu Qingfeng's body trembled and his voice stuttered a little. There was a hint of respect in his tone. "What's going on?" At this moment, a deep and authoritative voice suddenly sounded. Chapter 287. Then, a silver-haired old man wearing a golden-threaded alchemist's robe strode over. "Deputy Pavilion Master Yi, this is..." Gu Qingfeng finally remembered that he had not asked Ziyue for his name. Ziyue introduced himself. "Senior brother Bai seems to be a second-grade alchemist and is about to take the test." Gu Qingfeng hurriedly explained respectfully. "Oh." Yi Kaiyang's eyes lit up and his gaze fell on Ziyue. He said, "A second-grade alchemist must be able to refine a second-grade spirit pill. I happen to have some time now. I wonder if you can show me a thing or two." "Of course." Ziyue nodded. Then, the group of people directly entered a secret alchemy room. This is the earth-fire alchemy room of our alchemy pavilion. We have already prepared the materials for the 3 sets of green jade pill. You can refine them yourself here. Also, because this is a test, Alchemist Gu and I will be watching from the side. I hope you can understand." Yi Kaiyang introduced. "Okay." Ziyue did not say much and looked at the center of the alchemy room. Waves of violent flames rose up and down. Even with the isolation of the array, the terrifying pressure of the flames, and the heat that seemed to be able to burn everything in the world to ashes were terrifying. If the earth fire was completely unleashed, its power would be much stronger than the earth fire technique that he had mastered. Perhaps only the full power of the ice flame technique could be comparable to the earth fire. There was also an alchemy furnace in the alchemy room. It was 3 feet tall and was a high-level Dharma artifact with 72 restrictions. Because it was a public Dharma artifact, it did not need to be specially refined to be used. Ziyue was not picky. He stretched out his hand and patted the alchemy furnace, dragging it directly above the earth fire. He opened the array according to the method. Boom! In an instant, a scorching heat surged out from the depths of the ground. The alchemy furnace trembled slightly as if it could not withstand the heat. This earth fire is indeed extraordinary. Ziyue was not surprised. With a slight touch, a spiritual light flashed above the alchemy furnace, displaying the effect of suppressing the flames. When the alchemy furnace was slightly red and the temperature had reached an astonishing level, Ziyue calmly threw material for the green jade pill into the alchemy furnace. The moment the materials fell, the pill incantation descended. What a skilled technique. It's impossible to do something like this without refining it thousands of times. Yi Kaiyang's eyes flashed as he exclaimed in a low voice, "I'm ashamed of my inferiority. Compared to him, when I dealt with it, it was much cruder. This senior brother really has the strength of a second-grade alchemist." Gu Qingfeng's expression was serious as he said in admiration, "Alchemist Gu, you don't have to belittle yourself. I heard that you've been trying to concoct second-tier pills recently. It won't be long before you become a second-tier alchemist," Yi Kaiyang said with a smile. "Just by watching senior brother concoct, I know that I'm still far from being a second-tier alchemist. Moreover, it's not that easy to become a second-tier alchemist. Previously, I prepared more than 50 sets of materials for the green jade pill, but all of them failed. This time, I want to be more prepared, so I prepared 100 sets of materials. I plan to start cultivating in seclusion next month. I've already spent nearly 5,000 karma points. If I don't succeed, I'll have to wait for a year or two to accumulate karma points again." Gu Qingfeng sighed. While they were talking, Ziyue's refining had reached the most critical moment. Ziyue casually threw the last 2 materials into the alchemy furnace at the same time. At the same time, he used his pill incantation to fuse the 2 materials together. Then, he fused them with the other materials in the alchemy furnace. This step tested the alchemist's control of the temperature of the materials and his grasp of the timing of the pill incantation. Yi Kaiyang and Gu Qingfeng stopped talking at this time. Their eyes were wide open, and they did not miss a single detail. "The pills are done." Buzz! The alchemy furnace trembled slightly and emitted a faint light. The materials in the alchemy furnace quickly fused and formed a light green spiritual pill that was as smooth as jade. At this time, Ziyue did not stop. He used another pill incantation. Buzz! Under the influence of the pill incantation, the spiritual pill immediately spun at an extremely fast speed. As the spiritual pill spun, wisps of impurities, pill poison chi, and even the fire poison chi that leaked out from the earth fire were thrown out and turned into extremely faint green smoke. Pill flinging technique. This is the pill flinging technique. Gu Qingfeng was stunned. His eyes widened, and he almost lost his voice. That's right. This is a high-level technique to improve the quality of the spiritual pill after the pill is formed. I didn't expect fellow cultivator Bai to have mastered such a technique at such a young age. It seems that he is not only a second-tier low-tier alchemist, but also a second-tier mid-tier alchemist, or even a second-tier high-tier alchemist. Yi Kaiyang's breathing quickened. He was extremely shocked. Collect. As soon as he used the pill collecting technique, the green jade pill turned into a stream of light and flew directly into Ziyue's hand. His technique is skillful and experienced, especially the pill flinging technique at the end. It was really like the finishing touch, a stroke of genius. Fellow cultivator Bai's alchemy skills are far beyond the level of a second-tier, low-tier alchemist, right? At this time, Yi Kaiyang also stepped forward and said with a look of amazement. Gu Qingfeng also had a look of shock on his face. He originally thought that he was not too far away from Ziyue, but now it was like the difference between heaven and earth. He could not help but mutter in his heart, is he really a second-tier, mid-tier alchemist? Ziyue smiled slightly and handed over the green jade pill in his hand. There are only 3% impurities. This is a second-tier, high-tier spirit pill. Yi Kaiyang's eyes fell on the spirit pill, and he said with certainty. Then he looked at Ziyue and explained, a second-tier, low-tier alchemist is a second-tier, low-tier alchemist. A second-tier, mid-tier alchemist is a second-tier, mid-tier alchemist. A second-tier, high-tier alchemist is a second-tier, high-tier alchemist. Fellow cultivator Bai's green jade pill is second-tier, high-tier, so he's a second-tier, high-tier alchemist. Hearing this, Gu Qingfeng was shocked. Second-tier, high-tier alchemist? Although he had tried to overestimate senior brother Bai's alchemy skills, he never expected him to be so powerful. In the entire alchemy pavilion of Chaiyang sect, there were only 13 second-tier alchemists, not to mention first-tier alchemists. Among them, there were only 2 who were second-tier, high-tier alchemists. One was the deputy pavilion master, Yi Kaiyang, and the other was Elder Zhou, who never cared about worldly affairs and only focused on alchemy. As for the pavilion master, Elder Qian, who was the only third-tier alchemist in the entire Chaiyang sect, he was not included in this list. Thank you for your recognition, Pavilion Master Yi, Ziyue said with a smile. This is your strength. I just did not expect fellow cultivator Bai's alchemy skills to be so brilliant. Why did you only report to the alchemy pavilion now? If we had known that there was such a skilled alchemist, our Chaiyang sect would not have been defeated by Jiuhua Immortal Palace in the alchemy conference 3 months ago. Yi Kaiyang said with a little regret. I'm a rogue cultivator and have just joined the Chaiyang sect less than a month ago. Ziyue explained. Of course, even if he had joined the Chaiyang sect earlier, he did not have his current alchemy skills 3 months ago. He did not even know the pharmacology of alchemy, let alone participate in the alchemy conference. Who would have thought that he would have such a heaven-defying item like the attribute panel? Oh, Yi Kaiyang was even more surprised when he heard this. He wanted to find out more about Ziyue's alchemy heritage and find out what kind of person he was to be able to teach such a talented alchemist who had become a second-tier, high-tier alchemist at such a young age. However, after thinking about it, he gave up on the idea. This kind of thing was still a taboo in the cultivation world, especially since Ziyue was a rogue cultivator who had joined the Chaiyang sect. There might be some entanglements between them. Yi Kaiyang felt that it was better not to investigate in vain. However, he said, since fellow cultivator Bai is also a second-tier, high-tier alchemist, why don't you also take the position of an elder in the alchemy pavilion? Actually, this position is quite easy. Every year, you only need to refine 200 second-tier elixirs for the alchemy pavilion. The materials are all provided by the alchemy pavilion, so you don't have to do anything. Every year, you can also receive 3,000 karma points. If you guide other alchemists to break through their ranks, you will also receive additional rewards. In addition, if you encounter any major incidents and need to take on alchemy tasks, you will also have to accept the conscription. Of course, there are usually generous karma points as rewards, so it is not a loss. We alchemists can only improve through continuous alchemy. Sure, Ziyue naturally did not know that many complicated thoughts flashed through Yi Kaiyang's mind. After thinking for a while, he agreed to it. Only with effort would there be gains. Compared to the gains, his effort was very little. 200 second-tier elixirs a year was nothing. As for the conscription, it usually only happened when the Chaiyang sect was at war with other immortal sects or other forces. Now that everything was calm, he naturally did not consider it. Also, I would like to ask if I want to collect materials for alchemy, can I borrow the power of the alchemy pavilion? Ziyue immediately asked. This was also the main reason why he showed his alchemy skills and joined the alchemy pavilion. There were a total of 49 types of materials needed to refine the Aperture Enlightening Elixir. There were about 37 types of common materials, but there were still 12 types that were relatively rare. Among the 12 types of rare materials, 3 of them were extremely precious. If one did not have a strong foundation, one would not be able to obtain them at all. If he were to rely on himself to collect them, it would probably take a long time for him to collect all of them. However, if he borrowed the Alchemy Pavilion, it would be completely different. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.